Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Alex Murdaugh. Richard Alexander Alex Murdaugh, born May 27, 1968, is a member of a prominent and well-connected South Carolina legal family. The Murdaugh family has dominated the region's legal system for more than 100 years, with 3 consecutive generations serving as district attorneys of the 14th Judicial District from 1920 to 2006. However, that dynasty has come to an abrupt end for Alex. The Murdaugh family has been building the foundation for their success for decades. Specifically, when Alex's great-grandfather, Randolph Murdaugh Senior, founded the law firm Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Eloth, and Dietrich, PMPD, they became an influential family in the area. Their strong presence led to the Hampton area being referred to as Murdaugh County. Alex sought to follow in his family's footsteps and pursued a law degree at the University of North Carolina. While in college, he met and married High's wife, Margaret Maggie Branstetter, in 1993. They began seeing each other in 1991 and were married on August 14, 1993, at the Second Presbyterian Church in South Carolina. Alex, a personal injury attorney who works at the family firm PMPD, seeks to continue the family legacy. Unlike previous generations of Murdaughs, however, Alex abused the power and influence of the family business to cover up financial crimes, theft, and even suspected murder. His nefarious dealings lasted for more than a decade until his youngest son, Paul, died in a boating accident. Paul's boating accident was the latest in a string of suspicious deaths linked to the Murdaugh family. Many believe that these deaths were not actual accidents but part of a larger cover-up. Given the history and resources of the Murdaugh family, this theory seems plausible, especially considering how they handled Mallory Beach's death. Paul Murdaugh sailed his family boat to a party on Pucaw's Island on February 23, 2019. Having just graduated from high school, Paul and his girlfriend Morgan Dowdy, along with Anthony Cook and Mallory Beach, wanted to have a party and a night of unsupervised fun. They planned to start the night with a house party and oyster roast on the island. However, parties can't start without alcohol, so Paul bought some beer and hard liquor using his brother's ID. They left the Murdaugh River house at 7 p.m. By midnight, they were ready to continue their fun, so Paul decided to steer the boat to downtown Beaufort. There, he and Connor, a teenager, also joined the boat party, had 2 rounds of drinks around 1 a.m. On the way back to the boat, Paul and Connor were caught on a surveillance camera. At this point, Paul had been drinking heavily, and according to other passengers, he began to act strangely around 1:15 a.m. As they sailed, the situation became more complicated. The group started to disagree with Paul as he steered the boat in a disoriented manner and acted as if he were drunk. Mallory recalled that Anthony asked Paul to take him to a nearby rock to get off, but Paul refused. Morgan later commented that Paul took his hands off the wheel several times to argue with her, which made Mallory very nervous. GPS data from the boat's Garmin device indicated a period of acceleration. Paul, however, denied pushing the boat forward, but he was at the wheel at 2:20 a.m. when the boat hit the bridge, throwing Mallory into the water. The other teens were also in danger. Connor suffered a broken jaw and Morgan sustained a serious hand injury. Connor called 911 and help arrived immediately. When Deputy Beaufort arrived, the teens were in a state of chaos. The first thing he noticed was that Anthony was in distress. He reported that when he saw Paul smiling, Anthony actually tried to run past him to get to Paul. Police reported finding blood in the main cabin of the boat and a large crack in the hull from the collision. All of the teens were intoxicated and were taken to the hospital for treatment, except for Anthony. Everyone agreed to treatment except Paul, who was highly agitated and had a blood alcohol level of 0.243, while above the legal limit. Paul's father, Alex, was present that night, going from room to room trying to calm everyone down and control the situation. After 8 days of searching, Mallory's body was finally found. The autopsy revealed that she died from blunt force trauma to the head and subsequent drowning. Several witnesses, including Paul's girlfriend Morgan, testified that Paul was speeding in the boat that night. However, Paul was neither arrested nor charged. This led to speculation that Alex may have intervened in the legal process to help his son escape punishment. In March 2019, the Murdaugh family was sued for wrongful death. Mallory's family alleged that Paul's mother, Maggie, knew her son was intoxicated while the group was boating. Additionally, they claimed that his brother Buster provided the paperwork necessary for the group to purchase alcohol. It was not until April 18, 2019, on Mallory's 20th birthday, that Paul was charged with 3 felony counts of operating a boat while intoxicated, resulting in her death and the serious injury of 2 other passengers. Paul pleaded not guilty and was released on $50,000 bail. Unfortunately, Paul's trial date never arrived. He died before the case could proceed. Another death that appears to be linked to the Murdaugh family is that of Stephen Smith, an openly gay teenager whose body was found on July 8, 2015, lying in the middle of a road in Hampton County, South Carolina. The cause of death for the victim was severe head trauma. The incident was initially ruled a hit-and-run accident, and no suspects were arrested. However, the victim's mother believes her son was murdered in a hate crime. Stephen had been classmates with Buster Murdaugh in high school. In addition to their friendship, there were rumors that the two had been romantically involved. Some have suggested Buster was involved in Stephen's death and that the story of him running away after the accident was a lie. On March 22, 2023, the South Carolina Department of Law Enforcement reopened the case, confirming that his death was indeed a homicide, although no suspects have been named. Another case involves the Murdaugh family. Gloria was the longtime housekeeper for Alex's family. On February 2, 2018, she suffered a serious head injury after falling down the stairs at the Moselle mansion. She later died on February 26, 2018, from complications related to the accident. Alex claimed that his dogs greeted Gloria at the top of the stairs, causing her to trip and fall backward, leading to the accident. It is unclear why no autopsy was performed to confirm Alex's version of events. Gloria's death certificate listed the cause of death as natural causes. Gloria's sons sued for their mother's untimely death in 2018 and were awarded a $1.4 million insurance settlement in 2020. However, the money never reached them. Alex allegedly plotted to collect the insurance money, approached Gloria's sons, and encouraged them to sue him, even introducing them to an attorney named Corey Fleming. Corey Fleming was a longtime friend and associate of one of Alex's sons. They conspired to defraud and steal the Gloria family's insurance money. They wired the insurance money into Alex's bank account without notifying the Gloria family that they had received the money. Gloria's sons then filed a new civil lawsuit on September 15, 2021, against Alex. On the same day, state investigators opened a criminal investigation into Gloria's death. Investigators are trying to determine whether there is any criminal liability in her death. Based on a request from the Hampton County coroner, they found that Gloria's cause of death was not due to natural causes. After Gloria's family gave permission, authorities conducted an autopsy to investigate further. In late September 2021, Alex faced multiple charges related to financial misconduct and embezzlement. Before the Gloria family sued, Alex had been involved in fraud and embezzlement for nearly a decade. Alex was accused of participating in a money laundering and painkiller abuse scheme that lasted from October 2013 to September 2021, along with his distant cousin and co-defendant, Curtis Smith. On September 4, 2021, Alex and Curtis conspired to commit murder. Alex provided Curtis with a gun and instructed him to shoot Alex himself, intending for Buster, Alex's only surviving son, to collect Alex's life insurance policy after his death. Curtis went to the location Alex had prepared, where Alex pretended that his tire was flat, and Curtis shot him as instructed. However, the bullet only caused minor injuries to Alex, who called 911 himself. When local law enforcement inspected the scene, they recognized signs of foul play but were unable to prove it. A few days later, Alex admitted that he had conspired with Curtis and staged the shooting. His lawyer informed him that he was mentally unstable and that malicious elements were taking advantage of the situation. They claimed that Alex wanted to commit suicide so that Buster could collect a $10 million life insurance policy. Alex turned himself in when he learned a warrant had been issued for his arrest and was charged with fraud and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. He filed a police report just 2 days after the incident. Alex announced that he would resign from his family law firm and enter rehab for treatment. After his release, he was quoted as saying that he had made many decisions that he regretted. In September 2021, the South Carolina Supreme Court indefinitely suspended Alex's law license. Further investigation into Alex's life revealed that he had committed several financial crimes, including tax evasion, embezzlement, and misappropriation of funds from clients and the law firm where he worked. Alex was released from rehab on October 14, 2021, and was later arrested. He was charged with 2 felony counts of fraud. The arrest was based on an investigation into the misappropriation of investment funds related to the unnatural death of Gloria. This time, Alex was denied bail. This was just the beginning of Alex's legal troubles. On November 18, 2021, he was indicted on 27 counts of financial fraud, including allegedly stealing money from clients, other lawyers, and the family of his deceased housekeeper. On December 9, 2021, an additional 21 charges were filed against Alex, bringing the total to 48. The charges include 1 count of counterfeiting, 4 counts of money laundering, 7 counts of computer crime, and 9 counts of breach of trust with intent to commit fraud, among others. It is estimated that Alex stole more than $6.2 million from his victims. The investigation into Alex's business dealings has been ongoing, with new charges being filed against him. By June 2022, the total number of charges against him had reached 81. On July 13, 2022, when Alex was officially disbarred, he faced a total of 84 criminal charges and 11 lawsuits. Mallory Beach's mother, whose daughter was a 19-year-old victim, was one of several people who filed lawsuits related to the estate of Margaret and Paul Murdaugh. The prominent attorney's alleged financial misconduct has raised questions about his character and conduct. The South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, SLED, has decided to review what they know and have accepted as the truth about the double murder and further investigate the financial crimes against Alex. Investigators realized that this was a troubled marriage. Alex and Maggie were experiencing marital difficulties. Maggie was living separately at the family home on Edisto Island, which is a little over an hour's drive from the Moselle estate. Maggie's sister, Marion Brandstetter, told police that Maggie had no plans to see her husband on the night of the murder. Alex contacted Maggie on that fateful day, asking her to come to the family hunting lodge. He wanted her to accompany him to visit his father, who was dying and could pass away at any moment. Initially, she did not want to go but texted a friend, saying that her husband's behavior was suspicious and that he might be planning something. She suggested they meet at the hospital instead of following her husband. Eventually, she agreed to drive to the Moselle estate before going to the hospital to visit her ailing father-in-law. However, she was murdered before she had a chance to see him. Maggie and her youngest son were murdered at the Murdaugh family's 1,700-acre farm in Moselle, which included a house, a doghouse, a cabin, and wetlands. Maggie and Paul were shot multiple times near the doghouse. Paul was shot twice with a shotgun, while Maggie was shot 5 times with a different weapon, which ballistics analysis showed was a .300 caliber round from an AR-style rifle. Alex stated that he had taken a long nap that day before visiting his dad, who suffered from dementia. He claimed he was gone for about 45 minutes to an hour and a half, and when he returned, he found his wife and youngest son dead on the floor near the doghouse. Law enforcement reviewed Alex's schedule that night, and he admitted that he had taken a nap on the couch before leaving for his dad. In this case, police investigated the motive behind prominent attorney Alex's murder of his family. Investigators found a key clue. Weeks before the killings, a grand jury subpoenaed Alex's finances for an probe related to his son Paul's 2019 fatal boating accident. This may have been the primary motive. Alex is worried that all his financial wrongdoing will be exposed following a hearing scheduled for June 10, 2021. Furthermore, his law firm has uncovered his misuse of company funds. Gene Singer, the company's chief financial officer at the time, confronted Alex about the missing money on June 7, 2021, the day of the murder. State authorities say the financial pressure used Alex to panic and fear that his world was falling apart. Once a prominent lawyer in South Carolina, Alex devised a bold plan to hide his financial crimes. However, these acts are gradually becoming public and drawing sympathy away from him. On July 14, 2022, 13 months after the shooting that killed his wife and son, Alex was charged with their murders. His trial commenced with charges of murder and possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime. The prosecution claimed that Alex used both a handgun and an AR rifle to shoot and kill his wife and son at close range. The murder weapons were never found. Alex's defense team argued that the shootings were carried out by 2 different shooters based on the weapons used. An expert witness for the defense stated that the height of the shooters could have ranged between 5 feet 2 inches and 5 feet 4 inches, while Alex stands at 6 feet 4 inches tall, which disqualified him as a suspect. Prosecutors pointed to the gunshot evidence as indicating Alex's involvement. However, the expert witness, when questioned, acknowledged that other factors besides height could have influenced the trajectory of the bullets. The ballistics investigation determined that Maggie was shot with .300 blackout rounds from an AR-style rifle. Investigators found a box of these bullets on the Murdaugh family property. The state's attorney argued that Alex killed his wife and son to gain sympathy and avoid responsibility for his financial crimes. However, Alex's attorney disputed this theory, claiming that there was no reason for Alex to divert the financial investigation away from himself and instead put himself at the center of a murder investigation. During the trial, evidence emerged suggesting that Alex was not the one who directly committed the murders that the South Carolina Department of Law Enforcement, SLED, was investigating. Alex's attorney, Dick Harputlian, argued that he had an alibi for the night of the murders and had an motive to kill Maggie and their youngest son, Paul. He portrayed Alex and Maggie's marriage as one of everlasting love. However, prosecutors presented 2 videos of Alex from the night of the murders, taken hours apart. One was from Paul's Snapchat, and the other was from a law enforcement officer's body camera at the scene of the crime. The Snapchat footage was taken about an hour before the murders. When compared to what Alex was wearing after the incident, there was a clear discrepancy in clothing. In the Snapchat video, Alex was dressed in a blue shirt, which was different from the one he wore that was captured on the police body camera. Investigators concluded that they did not find the blue shirt they were looking for. Prosecutors believe Alex attempted to influence a key witness's testimony by asking if she remembered the shirt he was wearing the night of the incident. Alex's cell phone records showed that he was only at his mother's house for about 15 to 20 minutes. Alex's MOT. Hers caretaker also confirmed this, claiming that he only stayed for about 15 to 20 minutes before leaving. However, Alex claimed that he stayed for at least 45 minutes, and possibly as long as an hour and a half. When asked how long he stayed with his mother, Alex responded, about 15 to 20 minutes. 20 minutes at most. The most important piece of evidence was found on Paul's phone, which was recovered at the scene. It included a video that Paul had recorded at 8:44 p.m., just minutes before investigators believe the murder occurred. The video was recorded in a dog kennel and featured the audio of 3 separate voices. Family and friends identified the voices as those of Paul, Maggie, and Alex. This placed Alex in the vicinity of the murders, although he claimed he was never in the doghouse that night. During the 5th week of the trial, Alex took the stand and insisted that he never intended to harm his wife and son. He admitted that he had lied about his alibi, claiming that his was because he was addicted to opiates and prone to paranoia at the time. Prosecutors argued that after Alex killed his wife and son, he used his wife's phone to make several calls and send text messages to construct his alibi. Cell phone records also showed that Alex and his wife's phones locked within seconds of each other, which was presented to the jury as additional evidence. Based on data from Alex's cell phone, prosecutors noted that he engaged in a number of unusual activities during the timeframe of the murders. They claimed he attempted to conceal or destroy evidence that could link him to the case. However, Alex's attorneys countered this claim by pointing out that Alex's phone activity did not align with his wife's actions, arguing that it was impossible to conclude that he took his wife's phone after the shooting. Ultimately, the video recorded at the dog kennel provided decisive evidence that influenced the case outcome. The jury returned its verdict after 3 hours of deliberation on March 2, 2023. They found Alex guilty on all counts and sentenced him to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. In addition, the jury also convicted him of 2 counts of using a weapon in a violent crime, which resulted in an additional 5 years in prison. Alex pleaded guilty to 22 counts of financial crimes as part of a deal but maintained his innocence regarding the murders of his wife and son. On March 9, 2023, he filed an appeal of his double murder conviction. During the trial, Alex's attorney filed a motion for a new trial after discovering evidence of jury tampering by Rebecca Hill, a Colleton County court clerk. Rebecca allegedly advised the jury not to believe Alex's testimony and the other evidence presented by the defense. She also allegedly pressured the jury to quickly return a guilty verdict and misrepresented key information to the judge. A hearing will be held for Alex's attorneys to present evidence and witnesses to support her claims. However, no judge has yet been selected to preside over the hearing. With Alex's appeal, more than 100 drug and financial crime charges, and multiple lawsuits pending, we can expect that more new information about Alex will be revealed in the future. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Annie Tayan. Annie Tayan was born on May 1, 1965, in Charleston, South Carolina, and was raised by her mother. She had a strong love for life, dancing, fun, and the simple pleasures it brought. Annie dreamed of having a family and considered motherhood her greatest goal. She began this journey very early, giving birth to her first son, Jemia, at the age of 18, followed by her second son, Sean, just a year later. By the age of 20, she welcomed her third child, a daughter named Shane. Unfortunately, shortly after Shane was born, the children's father left Annie, became uninvolved in their lives, and abandoned the family. Annie faced the hardships of raising 3 young children in a rented apartment in Maine. In 1987, when her youngest daughter Shane was only 6 months old, Annie, 22, met Michael Palin, 32, a Navy officer stationed on the aircraft carrier Bramby. Their meeting took place in Portland, Maine, where Michael's ship was docked, and he felt an immediate attraction to Annie during their waterfront encounter. Michael lived in Charleston, South Carolina, and was a respected member of the Navy, known for his work as a computer systems operator. He was actively involved in military operations and had received several awards. Annie was fascinated by Michael's naval career and quickly fell in love with him, telling a friend that she had found a man she felt was truly worthy of her love. After dating for a few months, Annie and Michael decided to move in together, creating a family with 2 sons and a daughter. Unfortunately, their life together took a tragic turn when a fire broke out in their apartment. Annie was away at the time, leaving Michael with the children. Michael, along with Jemia and Sean, were able to escape, but Shane, who was too young to walk, was left behind. When Annie returned, she tried to enter the burning apartment to save Shane, but the neighbors prevented her. The loss of Shane in a fire had a profound effect on Annie. After the devastating fire, Annie and her sons moved to her mother's house in Portland. Meanwhile, Michael focused on his work and decided to stay in the barracks. A few months after the move, a disturbing event occurred near Annie's mother's house. A shed in the backyard was set on fire. The police quickly traced the source of the fire and found a lighter engraved with the name Bramby, the ship on which Michael served. This discovery made Michael the prime suspect in the arson case. However, despite the incriminating evidence, the police were unable to link him to the crime due to insufficient evidence. After the second fire, Maine child welfare authorities discovered that Annie's sons were living in unsafe conditions with her. As a result, they made the decision to remove Jemia and Sean from her custody and place them in the care of the Department of Social Services. This decision devastated Annie, who tried her best to regain custody of her children. But she was unsuccessful and lost custody of her sons. When Michael's ship returned to Charleston, South Carolina, he settled into a rental apartment and reunited with Annie. Despite their complicated past, Annie decided to move in with him in Goose Creek, a suburb of Charleston. However, while there, Annie discovered a photo of Michael wearing a wedding ring, revealing that he was married. When confronted, Michael confessed to Annie that he had been married but was now divorced. He explained that his ex-wife, Dawn Breeze, and their 3 children lived with his mother in Savannah, Georgia. Although Michael assured Annie that he was no longer in a relationship with Dawn, Annie was deeply troubled by this revelation. She considered leaving him but ultimately chose to stay, seeing Michael as a partner with whom to start a family. However, their living situation became negative. Michael became increasingly hostile and disrespectful to Annie. As she considered moving back to her mother's home, she discovered she was pregnant. This unexpected news kept her from leaving and brought her joy as she anticipated the birth of another child. In October 1989, Annie gave birth to her 4th daughter, Jade. Although she knew Jade could never replace her lost daughter, she felt that Jade filled an important void in her heart. In the month after Jade was born, Michael's treatment of Annie worsened. He began publicly insulting and humiliating her. Annie confided to a friend that she feared that if she tried to leave, Michael would relentlessly pursue her. His controlling behavior increased. he locked Annie in their apartment. When he left for work, he would disconnect his phone and take it with him. Annie became increasingly concerned about his actions. Annie, feeling distressed, called her best friend Katie French. During the call, Annie revealed that she was planning to leave Michael. However, Michael threatened that if she left, their daughter Jade would stay with him and Annie would never see her again. Overwhelmed, Annie cried and begged Katie to come immediately to help her and Jade. Unfortunately, Katie was busy and unable to help. Instead, she sent Annie money for a bus ticket, hoping that it would help her escape and return to Portland. This urgent conversation turned out to be their last. 2 days later, on November 7, 1989, Katie tried to contact Annie but received no response. A few days later, Michael informed Katie that Annie had left on November 6, taking her belongings and heading to an unknown destination. Katie expected Annie to contact her from her new home, but after 2 weeks of no news, she grew increasingly worried. By Thanksgiving, November 24, Annie had been out of contact for 20 days. Worried about Annie's safety, Katie tried to contact Annie's friends and acquaintances, but no one had any information about her. When Katie tried to report Annie Tayan, 24, missing to the police, she was told that she could not file a formal report because she was not a family member. As months passed without any updates on Annie, Katie finally contacted Michael's mother. Katie was shocked to learn that Annie's youngest daughter, Jade, was living with Michael's mother. The news confirmed Katie's deepest fears. She was certain that Annie would never willingly leave her daughter behind. Shortly after the disturbing events, Michael Palin moved to the naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. He did not appear to be concerned about her disappearance. Michael did not contact the police or begin a search for Annie. The official search began after Annie's mother reported her missing. Initially, the investigation focused on her husband Michael Palin, who quickly became the prime suspect. Michael explained that on the morning of November 6, he woke up to find Annie had left, leaving their daughter with him. Michael said that the night before, Annie had mentioned that she wanted to end their relationship. Michael did not look for Annie because he thought their relationship was over and felt no need to contact her any further. He also claimed that he was unaware of Annie's disappearance. After searching the couple's rented apartment, the police found no evidence. Annie Tayan's case seemed to have stalled, with no further search for her. Questions about her current location, whether she was still alive, and the possible motives of any kidnappers remain unanswered. The only known fact is that the last person confirmed to have seen her was her partner, Michael. For 4 long years, there was no news or sign of Annie. Her best friend, Katie French, was the only one actively looking for her. She worked tirelessly on the investigation and her phone bill alone cost her approximately $16,000. Katie hired a private investigator and was determined to continue the search. She contacted various organizations to gather information about Michael's background. Katie was convinced that Michael was dangerous and untrustworthy. She was terrified of him, knowing that if Michael learned of her ties to the police, it could put her in danger. In 1993, Annie's case was transferred to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, marking a major change in the investigation. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents began a comprehensive review of the case from the beginning. They found Michael Palin, who was staying at Pearl Harbor Naval Base in Hawaii. When Coast Guard agents attempted to speak with him about Annie's disappearance, Michael agreed to speak only if his attorney was present. He then completely stopped cooperating with the investigation and refused to provide any further assistance or information. The Coast Guard agents gathered all available information about Annie's disappearance and contacted the South Carolina Police Department. They asked the department to cross-reference their records with any unidentified bodies, noting that Annie had given birth just a month before her disappearance. South Carolina police then reported a case involving a dead woman who had also given birth a month before her death. They provided a sketch of what the woman looked like, shocking the Coast Guard agents. They believed they had found Annie Tayan. The discovery revealed a brutal murder, with her body found next to a highway in Jasper County, South Carolina, about 100 miles from her home with Michael. The crime scene photos were horrifying. Annie's face was severely crushed, and her skull was broken into 124 pieces, requiring nearly 500 hours of detailed reconstruction. Her body was found in a duffel bag that had been doused with gasoline and set on fire. The burning bag was discovered at 6 a.m. on November 7, 1989, the same time Katie French noticed Annie had stopped answering her calls. Annie was identified by comparing her dental records to those of the unidentified woman. After Annie's body was found, Michael became the prime suspect in her murder. The Coast Guard developed a detailed investigation plan, starting with a review of his financial transactions. They discovered that on the day Annie went missing, Michael had made a credit card purchase about 25 miles south of where her body was found. Additionally, his phone records showed that on the morning of November 6, he called his mother's home in Savannah twice, once at 4:35 a.m. and again at 5:17 a.m. Based on this evidence, police believe that Michael killed Annie in their apartment, then moved her body and left it on the side of the road, where he burned it. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents targeted Michael Palin's ex-wife, Dawn Breeze. At the time of Annie's death, Dawn was still married to Michael and lived in his mother's home in Savannah. After Annie went missing, Dawn divorced Michael and began moving around the state several times, apparently trying to avoid someone or something. Agents eventually tracked her down to Miami, Florida, in the summer of 1995, nearly 6 years after Annie Tayan's murder. When they found Dawn, she was making a living through psychic activities. During a visit to her workplace to discuss Annie's disappearance, Dawn responded surprisingly calmly. She asked how long the conversation would last, saying she wanted to eat if it lasted. This response surprised the agents, as they had expected a more emotional response regarding Annie. However, Dawn remained calm throughout their discussion. During the 10-hour interrogation, Dawn's story initially matched Michael's. She said that when she visited Michael's apartment, he told her that his mistress had left and that he planned to raise their daughter on his own. However, Dawn was silent, looked down, and said that she wanted to tell the truth. Her next speech was emotionless and tearless as she shared what she had kept secret for 6 years. Dawn revealed that Michael had called her to his Charleston apartment early one morning. She discovered Annie's body on the living room floor. Michael told Dawn to go into the bedroom to see his daughter. At the time, Dawn and Michael were still legally married and had 3 children together. Michael admitted to Dawn that he had had an affair with Annie, which resulted in the birth of a daughter. He begged her to accept the child and help him raise his daughter. Dawn claimed that rather than face a custody battle with Annie, Michael chose to kill to gain custody. Dawn added, on the night of November 5th and 6th, 1989, Michael and Annie went to bed after having sex. After a while, Annie fell asleep. At this point, Michael violently attacked her with a crowbar. Their daughter, Jade, was lying next to Annie in bed during the horrific incident. Michael continued to beat Annie on the head with increasing brutality. Despite her attempts to fight back, Annie eventually died of her injuries on that same bed. Michael contacted his wife, Dawn, asking her to come immediately. He then placed Annie's body in a large bag and put it in the trunk of his car, where he also had a can of gasoline. He drove with Dawn and their daughter Jade in the back seat for about 100 miles. When they reached a quiet area on the side of the road, Michael took Annie's body out of the trunk, doused it with gasoline, and set it on fire. After making sure the fire was burning well, he quickly returned to the car and drove Dawn and Jade back to his mother's house in Savannah. Dawn's revelation was crucial evidence in the investigation, the police asked Dawn to make a recorded phone call to Michael to talk about Annie's murder. Dawn agreed and called Michael, expressing her concern about the discovery and identification of Annie's body. Michael's response was, "No, they didn't." During the call, Dawn told Michael that blood had been found in their old apartment and that Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents suspected they were involved in a murder. She encouraged Michael to come up with an explanation for the blood. Michael responded, "Okay, we need to work together and come up with a solution." Although he did not admit anything directly, his demeanor showed that he understood the seriousness of the situation. At the end of the conversation, Michael warned Dawn to be careful with her phone calls and assured her that they would work together to resolve the situation. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents took Dawn to the crime scene to search for any remaining evidence. To protect her identity and ensure her safety as a cooperating witness, they disguised her before arriving at the apartment. Dawn carefully described and demonstrated where Annie's body was and the sequence of events. She pointed out a spot near the wall and baseboard where a significant amount of blood had seeped into the carpet and concrete floor below. Since Michael had moved out, the landlord had replaced and cleaned the carpet several times, which explained the lack of visible evidence. However, when the police used a special chemical on the concrete floor, a large purple stain appeared, indicating the presence of protein and confirming Dawn's account of where Annie's body had been. Despite the blood on the concrete, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents had difficulty confirming that the substance was blood, so they continued to search for more physical evidence. Dawn pointed to a nightstand containing a television next to the bed where Annie had been killed. She noted that blood had splattered on the television during the murder, and Michael had said that it needed a thorough cleaning. He had then disposed of the television, possibly selling it rather than throwing away a working appliance, given his frugal habits. Finding the television was difficult, but the agents were determined to find it. At this point, Michael Palin realized that the Naval Criminal Investigative Service was watching him, especially after a phone call with his ex-wife, Dawn. Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents were concerned that Michael might flee, or that he might threaten witnesses, harm them. On October 11, 1995, Michael attempted to escape, but was quickly apprehended and taken into custody by police. While Michael Palin was in police custody on suspicion of murder, Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents worked tirelessly to find and interview all the residents of the apartment complex where the murders took place in November 1989. Their efforts were rewarded when they spoke with a neighbor who said he had purchased a television from Michael. Amazingly, the television was still working and in the neighbor's home. The police quickly confiscated the television and sent it to the FBI lab for forensic analysis. This investigation led to a crucial discovery. Analysis found 11 blood stains inside the speaker. These blood samples were later compared to Annie's DNA, providing crucial evidence in the murder case. At this point in the case, Michael's attorney announced that he was willing to plead guilty, but only if the death penalty was removed from consideration. The prosecutor was not pleased with this development, but military law required such a plea bargain to be negotiated at trial. Michael admitted his guilt, recounting the details of his crimes objectively, his account showing no signs of remorse or empathy. As a result, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. He was also dishonorably discharged from the Navy. Dawn Breeze, who knew about her husband's crimes and remained silent for more than 6 years, escaped legal consequences thanks to her crucial confession to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, which greatly aided the investigation. Annie's children now know the truth about their mother's tragic fate and understand that she did not abandon them. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Kenneth Keith. Michael Hawkinsmith, 35, was born in Danville, Kentucky. He was a well-known pastor at a local church where he lived. After working at the church for a long time, he decided to work at a local pawn shop called ABC while continuing to work as a part-time pastor. After a while, due to the previous owner's health issues, Michael had to take over the entire pawn shop. Being an honest and helpful person, he easily connected with people. In his personal life, Michael was married to Angela, and the two had 2 children together, Andrew and Naomi. Michael and Angela jointly owned the ABC Gold, Games and More pawn shop in Danville, Kentucky. They homeschooled their 9-year-old son Andrew and took care of their newborn daughter Naomi. Andrew often visited his parents' workplace and considered it his playground. However, on the morning of September 20, 2013, the Hawkinsmiths went to the ABC store. The morning went as planned. Dan Smith, a regular at the pawn shop, made a scheduled visit. Smith, known as the Gold Man, was known for buying and selling gold between pawn shops across the state. About 15 minutes after opening, as Michael and Smith were making their transactions, a bearded man entered the store and ordered everyone to get on the ground, followed by horrific events. Andrew, who was at the ABC store at the time, after being instructed by his mother, Angela, to hide, noticed the tense situation and quickly called the police to report the situation. 6 minutes after the alarm call, the police arrived at the scene of the murder. When they entered the building, they found a large trail of blood that led them to Michael Hawkinsmith. They then found his wife, Angela, 38, and another victim, Dan Smith, 60, a broker, on the other side of the counter. All 3 victims had suffered serious injuries from gunshot wounds to the head and torso. Police later found Andrew, 9, and Naomi, 14 months, hiding in a closet. Andrew and Naomi had been through unimaginable horror and were orphaned, having lost both their parents. When examining the crime scene, police found 14 spent shell casings and 3 intact bullets, along with a briefcase belonging to Dan Smith. Remarkably, the victim's personal belongings and all the cash in the cash register were untouched, suggesting that robbery was not the motive. The case was complicated by the lack of surveillance cameras at the pawn shop. Therefore, police had to search for potential witnesses. An employee of Rainbow Cleaners, a nearby dry cleaner, provided vital information when he described a vehicle that had been parked near the building that morning. The vehicle was a silver pickup truck driven by a large man with a bushy beard. While one team of investigators searched the area, another team had to notify the victims' closest relatives of the tragedy. Michael's parents were devastated by the news. However, they also felt blessed to know that their grandchildren, Andrew and Naomi, had survived. The tragic news reached the daughter of the 3rd victim, Dan Smith. Dan Smith was involved in the purchase of precious metals and was well versed in the specifics of his job, which made it easy for him to find common ground with different people. His business involved handling large amounts of cash, sometimes in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. This led police to suspect that Dan Smith may have been the criminal's primary target. Through surveillance, police discovered that before going to the ABC Gold Games and More pawn shop, Dan Smith had gone to the Lawson Jewelry Store in Harrodsburg, 10 miles northeast of Danville. Inside the jewelry store, investigators found a surveillance camera mounted on the far wall that was monitoring every customer who entered and exited the store. Their goal was to determine if anyone was following Dan Smith. At 8:16 a.m., Dan Smith entered the store, and there were no other customers in the building at the time. Dan Smith was carrying a briefcase identical to the one later found at the ABC Gold Games and More pawn shop. After greeting the woman behind the counter with a smile, he walked toward the back of the store. Moments later, Dan Smith reappeared in the footage, exiting the back of the store, chatting briefly with an elderly woman who had just entered, and then leaving immediately. Footage from the exterior camera did not show anything suspicious. The police could do nothing but monitor the man, unaware that he would soon be at the center of a tragic event. Meanwhile, Andrew Hawkinsmith was brought to the police station to testify. Andrew told the story of how he was at the pawn shop with his parents when Dan Smith came in with a bag full of money. While Michael and Dan were talking, a stranger walked in and demanded the bag of money immediately. According to Andrew, Dan Smith immediately gave the stranger his bag of money. Andrew said that his father asked the man to stop, but the man also shot his father with a handgun similar to the one Andrew often played with. After that, his mother instructed him to take his younger sister, Naomi, to the back of the store and hide in the closet. Andrew picked up his sister and hid. At that moment, the criminal pointed the gun at Angela. The 9-year-old boy thought the reason the stranger did this might be because of the money. The boy described the stranger as a very tall man with a fake-looking blonde beard, which matched the description given by a witness from Rainbow Cleaners. In investigating the case, police thoroughly investigated the business run by the Hawkinsmith family. They discovered that the ABC Gold Games and More pawn shop had a different owner, Steve Devine. Although he usually attended Friday transactions with Dan Smith, he was absent on the morning of September 20th. This information raised concerns, making determining his whereabouts a top priority. Steve Devine explained that he had an allergic reaction that morning and had to cancel all his appointments. His wife confirmed this story. The alibi and the fact that Steve Devine did not own a silver pickup truck helped eliminate him as a suspect. Steve Devine also explained why there were no surveillance cameras in the pawn shop. According to him, the security system had been removed by the previous owner, Kenneth Allen Keith. The new owner had yet to install a replacement. Kenneth Allen Keith, 48, is a pastor like Michael Hawkinsmith. He sold the pawn shop after being diagnosed with brain cancer. However, he is still the owner of another similar establishment, Gold Rush Buyers, in Pulaski County, near Danville's Bowles district. Their friendship began when Michael worked at a church youth camp and lasted 15 years. The Hawkinsmiths respected Pastor Kenneth, and he was like a beloved uncle to Andrew. With no significant leads, investigators decided to search the street surveillance systems near ABC Gold Games and More and other pawn shops. They found a camera on the office building of the real estate company Danville Rentals. Surveillance footage captured a silver pickup truck at 8:45 a.m., but the image was too blurry to determine the license plate or make. However, eyewitness testimony from Rainbow Cleaners helped police identify the vehicle. The witness described the vehicle as an older model with a distinctive square body shape. The vehicle in the video also clearly showed a square rear bumper that matched this description. The color, type, and shape of the vehicle all suggested that police had found the vehicle of the criminal. They continued to search surveillance systems farther and farther away from the pawn shop. Finally, at 8:17 a.m., cameras at the local Ephraim McDowell Hospital captured the same vehicle. Investigators were able to determine that it was a silver Dodge pickup truck. Dan Smith's family was also devastated by the loss of their loved one. Despite their grief, they attended the funeral and held back their anger. In search of more clues, the Danville police asked the public to come forward with any information about the crime or the vehicle involved. On September 24th, the police received a call from Tracy Hurl, a pastor in Warren, Michigan. He claimed to be a friend of Kenneth Keith and said that in their last conversation, they had discussed the Danville murders. At that point, Kenneth seemed to have changed. Pastor Kenneth Allen informed Tracy that on that particular day, he was driving to Danville to pick up medication for his wife. Kenneth also expressed guilt over what had happened, as he had given Michael Hawkinsmith the opportunity to become the owner of his former business. It turned out Kenneth's relationship with the Hawkinsmith family was not what people thought. Tracy recounted that in a conversation with Kenneth, Kenneth said that Michael was a fraud and that Michael had done everything to take over the business from him. These statements aroused suspicion, leading to Kenneth being named a suspect. To verify Kenneth's alibi, investigators decided to review surveillance footage from the Good Neighbor Pharmacy, where Kenneth said he had purchased medication for his wife at 9:24 a.m. According to the surveillance footage, a man entered the pharmacy. It was Kenneth. But just a few minutes earlier, the man was not wearing a green jacket or a beard, which were easily identifiable features of an attacker. However, this did not rule out the possibility that Kenneth was involved in the attack. There was a 6-minute gap between Andrew Hawkinsmith's call to the police and Kenneth's arrival at the pharmacy. The police decided to check whether it was possible to travel from the crime scene to the Good Neighbor Pharmacy in such a short time. They found that the trip took about 5 minutes, so Kenneth could have committed the murder, quickly gotten in the car, and gone to the pharmacy to establish a solid alibi. In addition, the main clue was that Kenneth had an unregistered 2008 Dodge pickup truck, silver in color. However, all the evidence found was circumstantial and not enough to make an arrest. So the investigators asked Tracy Hurl to participate in a series of fake phone calls aimed at Kenneth. Fortunately, Tracy agreed. During these calls, Kenneth finally revealed his true feelings towards the Hawkinsmith family. Everyone had been waiting for this to happen. Kenneth began discussing details of the case that had not been made public. Kenneth said that he was in Danville, but he was at the pharmacy. Kenneth confirmed that he was standing in the pharmacy while all this was happening. Kenneth then explained that he had left Danville and returned to Somerset. He then drove to the car wash to prepare for a planned family vacation. At 10:50 a.m., Kenneth was seen on camera walking down the hallway to the cash register with a noticeable smile. Exterior camera footage covering the parking lot showed Pastor Kenneth leaving the car wash in the same silver Dodge at 11:25 a.m., matching all previous images captured by various surveillance systems in Danville. At that point, they had enough evidence to arrest Kenneth. However, when he was offered a lie detector test to clarify his role in the case, he reacted in an unusual way. He claimed that he would not be able to pass a lie detector test because, during his military service, he had performed some special missions that involved killing a number of people. Investigators then executed a search warrant at Kenneth Allen Keith's pawn shop and discovered some important evidence. They found a fake beard and a significant amount of cash without any legal explanation as to how he had obtained it. In particular, they also found bundles of money wrapped in a ribbon with the name of the bank that issued them, indicating that Dan Smith was a customer. Further investigation revealed that the money found in Keith's pawn shop had recently been withdrawn from the account of a deceased broker. This raised suspicions about Keith's involvement in the case. In addition, investigators also found several .22 caliber shell casings in Keith's pawn shop. After ballistic analysis, they discovered that these casings had been fired from the same type of weapon used to shoot Andrew and Naomi's parents. Kenneth Allen Keith was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and robbery. He believed that Michael Hawkinsmith and Steve Dine were conspiring to remove him from the business. However, there was no evidence that Michael Hawkinsmith and Steve Dine were involved in any conspiracy. When Kenneth met Dan Smith at the pawn shop, he tried to create a fake plan to make the police think that the case was a robbery. However, the plan failed when the police investigated and found no evidence of suspicious activities by Michael Hawkinsmith and Steve Dine. On September 20th, Kenneth arrived in Danville in his silver Dodge Caravan. He circled the pawn shop until he saw Dan Smith's car parked nearby. Kenneth then killed Dan Smith, Michael Hawkinsmith, and Angela Hawkinsmith. After taking all the cash, Kenneth calmly left the crime scene and stopped at the Good Neighbor Pharmacy, which was captured on surveillance cameras, creating a false alibi. Kenneth's decision to have his car washed appears to have been another attempt to remove any evidence that might have been left on the car. Prior to sentencing, in 2017, Kenneth Allen Keith pleaded guilty to all charges. He was sentenced to life in prison. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Ardith Wood. Ardith Wood, a 27-year-old woman, is a beautiful and extremely intelligent girl. She was a PhD candidate in philosophy at Waterloo University and worked as an editor for a philosophy journal. Ardith is about to achieve his long-held dream of becoming a professor. In the summer of 2003, Ardith visited her family in Ottawa, Canada. She spends time happily with her loved ones, going for walks and cooking together. On August 6th, Ardith went for a morning jog. When she returned home, she found her parents had thoughtfully prepared a delicious breakfast for her. With the warm weather, Ardith decided to borrow her brother's bike and go for a ride. She promised to return in a couple of hours. Her mother planned to go shopping before lunch, expecting Ardith to be back by then. Ardith cycled on a trail that wound through the forest, along the river, and past cliffs. The route was usually peaceful and safe, but on this day, something very bad happened. Ardith failed to return home, leaving her mother worried. A heavy downpour began, adding to the concern. The woman realized her daughter wouldn't be riding her bike in the bad weather, but as time passed and Ardith didn't return, the family began to search for her. They thought she might have fallen off her bike and needed help. Since the city has many bike paths, they weren't sure which one she chose. They had to search the entire town. Despite their efforts, they found nothing, and when night fell, they went to the police station. The bad weather forced them to postpone the search until the next morning. The next day there was still no news of Ardith, prompting police to launch the largest search operation in Ottawa history. The massive search operation involved around 1,000 people, including rescue teams, police officers, dog handlers and trained dogs, helicopters, and a large number of volunteers. Ardith's family joined the search, putting up posters with her photo all over the city. However, the first few days showed no progress. The police then asked the public for help. Before long, a local resident called in, saying that on the day Ardith disappeared, she was on the bike path in the forest and saw a suspicious man with a bicycle. A young man with a pleasant appearance, well-dressed but acting suspiciously, was described by the witness. His behavior was frightening, as he had attempted to push a girl off her bike and drag her into the bushes. Fortunately, others arrived on the scene, and the perpetrator fell behind, allowing the girl to escape quickly. Following this incident, the girl no longer felt safe walking or cycling alone. The incident occurred in the Green Creek area, and she suspected the stranger may have also attacked Ardith. The witness was asked to create a composite sketch at the police station. The suspect was described as a light-skinned, dark-haired young man with a beard and glasses, aged 20 to 30 years old. He was athletically built. However, when the sketch was shown to Ardith's family, they did not recognize anyone familiar to Ardith. The sketch's features, such as glasses and a beard, were common at the time, making it difficult to pinpoint a specific individual. The investigators decided not to share Ardith's picture with the media, as they were concerned it would trigger a flood of misleading tips. Instead, police showed her photo to local residents. Believing someone must have seen her due to her striking appearance, they believed it was likely that a witness had seen her and could offer a valuable clue. Their assumption proved correct when 16-year-old Laura called the police. Laura said she saw Ardith on the bike trail on the same day that Ardith went missing. Laura was riding her bicycle and noticed Ardith sitting on a rock, appearing to rest. As Laura continued on, she heard a scream and turned to see Ardith arguing with a man. Laura was unsure what to make of the situation, thinking it might be a lover's quarrel. Ardith didn't seem to be calling for help, and Ardith eventually followed the man into the woods. Laura wanted to know what was happening but was scared by an approaching storm, and she quickly rode home. As Laura was leaving, she thought she heard a scream. The police asked her to come to the station to look at a composite sketch of a suspect. She recognized the person in the sketch. According to Laura, the incident occurred around 10 p.m. at Green Creek. After that, the police received several more calls from girls who had encountered the same creepy guy on the trail. He had attacked them, but they were lucky enough to escape. There was one particular call from one woman that was especially noteworthy. She described how an attractive stranger approached her while she was walking. They had a pleasant conversation at first, but then his behavior changed drastically. The man started grabbing her, but the woman was able to push him away with her bicycle and quickly flee. She didn't look back, fearing he would catch up to her. When she got home, she told her family about the incident and warned them to stay away from that area. Strangely, none of the girls who were attacked had reported the incidents to the police. The search for the suspect focused on the creek area. Soon, the police found Ardith's bicycle, which suggested they were on the right track. Meanwhile, investigators received an anonymous call that would prove to be a crucial breakthrough in the case. He reveals that a terrible incident happened in the forest, and alarmingly he was involved in it. He said he didn't mean to hurt or kill anyone, but when he panicked, he hid the body. The man explained that he moved Ardith over a creek, made a shallow hole, and put her in it, hiding the spot with branches. Then, he quickly hung up the phone. The police were able to locate the source of the call, which was a phone booth situated 20 minutes away from Ottawa. The police quickly arrived, looking for witnesses or collecting evidence such as fingerprints or DNA from the anonymous caller. However, upon arrival, they were met with disappointment. The handset had been thoroughly wiped clean, and no eyewitnesses or surveillance cameras were found. The search for Ardith continued in Green Creek with the aid of specially trained dogs that could detect the scent of human remains. With the assistance of the dogs, the investigators located Ardith's grave, situated between two trees in a secluded, picturesque area. As the detective approached, they saw the partially buried, naked body of Ardith. Perhaps the criminal panicked after being seen by someone, leading to a hasty burial of Ardith. Upon examining the crime scene, criminologists found no fingerprints or DNA evidence. Medical examiners confirmed the cause of death as drowning, with algae present in Ardith's lungs, indicating she was alive when submerged in water. Despite the body being discovered naked, there were no definitive signs of rape, although the possibility was not ruled out. The police suspected the crime was sexually motivated, as the perpetrator targeted girls in secluded areas. Detectives were concerned that the suspect might commit again crime, so they had to quickly find and arrest him. The police thought the perpetrator had already assaulted several girls and killed Ardith, so they were determined to stop them from hurting anyone else. To expedite the investigation, authorities released a composite sketch of the suspect to the media, soliciting public assistance in identifying the individual. The response yielded approximately 4,000 leads, which investigators meticulously processed, a time-consuming task. A pivotal development emerged on September 10th, when police disclosed that the suspect had a distinctive eagle tattoo on his left shoulder, as reported by the girls who encountered him in the forest. A crucial lead emerged that could potentially track down the perpetrator. The media released a sketch of the tattoo, leading to several calls to the police from individuals reporting acquaintances with bird tattoos on various body parts. Unfortunately, these tips didn't yield any concrete results. However, in April 2004, investigators stumbled upon a significant clue while processing another batch of calls. A man claimed to know the killer, stating that the individual lived in the area and was seen riding a bicycle in the Green Creek vicinity around the time of the crime. Intrigued, detectives invited he for questioning. Upon arriving at the police station, investigators were astonished to find that the individual matched the perpetrator's description in both appearance and age. During the conversation, the young man displayed visible nervousness, stating that he frequently rode his bike along the trail without understanding the issue at hand. When asked to reveal his shoulder, an eagle tattoo was discovered, sparking further interest from the authorities. The investigation revealed that the man had a prior history of run-ins with the law, making him the prime suspect. During the 3-hour interrogation, he responded to questions with hostility and aggression. At one point, he described himself as unpredictable, like a scorpion under a rock. Despite lacking an alibi for the day of Ardith's disappearance, he denied any involvement in her murder. However, due to insufficient evidence, the suspect was released, but the police kept him under surveillance. Weeks later, he was brought in for questioning again. This time, the detectives were better prepared, having gathered more information about him. They also suggested he take a polygraph test, which he agreed to and surprisingly passed. Consequently, the police were left with no alternative but to dismiss the suspicions against him. With the investigation stalled, the Ottawa police offered a $50,000 reward for any information that would help solve the case, the largest reward ever offered in similar circumstances. The response was extremely strong, with approximately 5,000 calls received, each providing a potential lead for the police to investigate. The investigator became interested in a tip about Christopher Myers, a 25-year-old janitor who had previously been convicted of selling illegal substances. Colleagues described Christopher as quiet and non-confrontational, with a face that closely resembled the composite sketch of the suspect, including a similar beard. Initially, the police were thrilled, thinking they had found the right man. However, they were wrong. Christopher had an alibi for the day of Ardith's disappearance. His landlord stated that on August 6, 2003, Christopher was at home in the morning, then he heading to his job at a restaurant. This revelation puzzled the police, as they wondered how the landlord could recall the details of that day so clearly a year later. Another discrepancy emerged. Christopher did not have an eagle tattoo on his shoulder, despite witnesses claiming to have seen one. The detectives considered the possibility that he had removed the tattoo and remained convinced that Christopher was the suspect they were looking for. They were determined to prove it. A few weeks after Ardith's incident, a similar attack took place in the evening. A girl who bore a striking resemblance to Ardith was walking alone across a bridge when she noticed someone following her. Upon turning around, she saw an attractive man approaching on a bicycle. The girl made it clear she wasn't interested in talking and asked to be left alone. The man initially rode past her, but then turned his bicycle around and charged at her. With no one nearby to assist, the attacker jumped off his bike and forcibly dragged the girl into the bushes. Her loud screams seemed to frighten the assailant, causing him to flee. The victim reported the incident to the police, but it was handled by different investigators who treated it as an attempted robbery. The detectives working on Ardith's case didn't learn about this incident until much later. In May, another similar attack occurred, targeting a blonde woman. The woman was walking home late one evening after attending a party when a stranger approached her, trying to initiate a conversation. After she asked to be left alone, the stranger claimed to be lost and asked for directions. The woman provided him with the necessary information, and he seemingly left. However, just 10 minutes later, he launched a surprise attack on her from the bushes. The assailant violently attacked the girl, strangling her and twisting her neck. Believing her life was in danger, she fiercely resisted by screaming, hitting, and biting him. Her cries for help caught the attention of nearby residents, who rushed out to investigate. The commotion frightened the attacker, causing him to flee in haste, but he not before making a critical mistake, dropping his phone. Upon investigation, it was discovered that the phone belonged to Christopher Myers. This discovery confirmed the connection between Christopher Myers and a number of cases that shared a similar motif, all targeted blonde girls of similar appearance. When brought in for questioning, Christopher denied any involvement in the murder or other attacks, claiming he had never been to Green Creek or met Ardith. He attributed his behavior to mental health issues and uncontrollable aggression, but insisted he had never physically harmed anyone. Detectives observed that Christopher had crooked teeth and asked him to undergo a polygraph test. The 5-hour test revealed that Christopher was not telling the truth, but he insisted he was innocent, claiming the polygraph results were incorrect. As polygraph results are not admissible as evidence, Christopher to be released. Over the next 5 months, detectives gathered more evidence by interviewing Christopher's acquaintances, including family members, friends, co-workers, and his ex-girlfriend. The investigation found that Christopher had a tough childhood due to growing up in a home plagued by alcoholism. As a result, he developed attention deficit disorder and schizophrenia. Christopher was removed from his biological family and adopted by another couple who showed him love and care. However, his behavioral problems were too difficult to control, and when he was 12 years old, his adoptive parents took him back to the orphanage. As he aged, Christopher appeared to lead a typical life. He graduated from school, attended university, made friends, and lived in a dorm. However, Christopher's roommate thought him strange due to the disturbing stories he shared, which eventually led to him dorm kicked out. An ex-girlfriend revealed that Christopher enjoyed cycling in Ottawa's scenic trails and had a fascination with tattoos, notably one of an eagle on his left shoulder. A sketch of the tattoo was shown to the ex-girlfriend. She confirmed its resemblance to the one Christopher had. On October 13, 2005, Christopher was called in for questioning. The interrogation took place in a small room, with burly men who positioned their chairs close to Christopher, exerting significant psychological pressure. The investigators began with a straightforward assertion: "We know you are responsible for Ardith's death." Christopher gave a vague response initially. 3 hours later, he began testifying, but his account was confusing and inconsistent. He admitted to being in Green Creek on the day of the incident, where he met Ardith. He was drawn to her beauty and tried to get to know her. He started by complimenting her and chatting, then invited her into the woods, and she agreed. In the woods, Christopher claimed he hugged and kissed her, but she pulled away, Ardith apparently not enjoying his advances. Ardith tried to run but fell into the creek. Christopher claimed he tried to save her but was unsuccessful. His actions after the incident, however, raised suspicions. He pulled her body from the water, undressed her, and buried her. When faced with a murder charge, Christopher immediately retracted his statement, claiming he had never met Ardith and his testimony was based on information gathered from the press. Christopher eventually confessed to the murder, providing a map of the trails in Green Creek where he encountered Ardith. He also identified another individual, likely 16 years old Laura, who witnessed him with Ardith in the forest. Laura confirmed that Christopher was the man she saw at the time. On October 20, 2005, Christopher was arrested. Initially, he agreed to recreate the incidents at the crime scene but later claimed it was not the correct location. Despite the evidence matching, Christopher's unstable mental state led to inconsistent testimony, and he confessed to additional attacks on girls, resulting in further charges. During the trial, Christopher's lawyer portrayed him as a troubled young man. Initially, Christopher denied his previous confessions but later decided to plead guilty on January 8, 2008, following his defense attorney's advice. 5 years after the murder, Christopher admitted to the crime but refused to provide motives or details. He also confessed to the other attacks. The prosecution argued that Christopher's presence on the forest trail that day was not coincidental. Instead, he was deliberately stalking potential victims, much like a hunter. He had already assaulted several girls who managed to escape. It is thought that Christopher's intention was to sexually assault someone. Ardith happened to match his desired victim type, being a blonde woman he found attractive. Christopher tried to start a conversation with Ardith, but things got worse, and an argument broke out between them. Laura happened to be riding by, overheard their altercation. The killer tricked Ardith into going into the woods, where he attacked and tried to rape her. To escape, Ardith ran and jumped into the creek. However, Christopher caught up to her and drowned her, then buried her body. Ardith's parents supported the prosecution's account, stating that their daughter was a strong swimmer and couldn't have accidentally drowned in the creek. They believed Christopher had intentionally killed Ardith, but they couldn't understand why Ardith had followed him into the wood. As part of a plea deal, Christopher admitted to second-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years. In 2020, his parole application was rejected because authorities believed there was a significant likelihood he would reoffend against women. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ariel Castro. Ariel Castro was born in 1960 on July 10th in the city of Yauco in Puerto Rico. Ariel was the third child in a poor family of 4 children, including parents Liliana Rodriguez and Pedro Castro, and sisters O'Neill, Pedro, and older sister Bonita. Ariel's family barely made ends meet and his parents were constantly arguing. Before Ariel went to school, his parents divorced. His mother Liliana took care of all the children. Now Liliana had almost nothing left to feed her children. In desperation, Liliana and her children decided to move to the United States and settled for a while in southeastern Pennsylvania in the city of Reading. However, they soon moved to the neighboring state of Ohio and eventually settled in the city of Cleveland. Soon after, Ariel's father Pedro Castro also moved to Cleveland with his new wife and their children. Pedro Castro lived near Liliana and her children. Liliana later married, and Ariel soon had 4 more siblings. Ariel attended Lincoln West High School in Cleveland, graduating in 1978. In addition, Ariel also studied music and attended church regularly with her mother and siblings in a traditional Catholic family. As a teenager, Ariel met a young girl named Grimilda Figueroa, who lived next door to Castro. The two became friends while attending school, and Ariel and Grimilda later began dating. After saving money, Ariel and Grimilda decided to move to a house on Seymour Avenue in southwest Cleveland. The 2-story, 1,300 square foot house was built in 1890 and has been remodeled several times. Inside, there are 4 bedrooms, a dining room, a bathroom, and a spacious basement. However, since moving into the new house, Ariel regularly beats Grimilda and humiliates her morally and physically. Grimilda is still naive at this time and thinks that the situation will improve after the wedding and the birth of the child. However, as time goes by, the situation only gets worse. Grimilda tries not to let anyone know about the terrible things that are happening in her life. Grimilda hides her injuries under her clothes and makes up excuses for the injuries that cannot be hidden. In 1993, Ariel beat his wife so brutally that Grimilda suffered broken ribs, nose, and both arms from falling down the stairs after being pushed by Ariel. However, Grimilda steadfastly refused to report the incident to the police. The incident was covered up. Ariel repeatedly beat Grimilda in the mid-1990s. On one occasion, Ariel caused Grimilda a serious head injury that resulted in a blood clot and a tumor that could not be surgically removed. Ariel was arrested but released just a day later. By the late 90s, Grimilda was tired of the constant beatings and living in fear. Grimilda finally decided to file for divorce, took away the appliances, and moved out of the house. Grimilda won custody of all 4 of their children, Arlene, Antonio, Angie, and Amelia. However, Grimilda's nightmare did not end there. Ariel began to pursue Grimilda for money and threatened her to return to him. Realizing that Grimilda could not handle it on her own, Grimilda finally decided to report to the police to get a restraining order against Ariel. In late April 2012, Grimilda suffered complications related to an inoperable tumor caused by a head injury. Grimilda's children were old enough to care for themselves and live their own lives, so they did not need a guardian. However, the children still maintained contact with their father Ariel. Back in the early 2000s, Ariel lived alone in a 2-story house on Seymour Avenue. Ariel worked as a school bus driver and had a passion for playing the guitar. Ariel often performed at city festivals in Latin bands. His neighbors often spoke highly of him, praising his hospitality and kind personality. However, there were many strange things in Ariel's actions that went unnoticed. That he was prosecuted several times for traffic violations while driving a school bus. He had speeding and dangerously making U-turns, for which he was fined and even suspended for a while until he was fired in early 2013 for an act that threatened the lives and health of his young passengers. Additionally, Ariel frequently changed bands because Ariel was kicked out for being late, disrupting rehearsals and concerts. Another strange thing is that after his divorce from Grimilda, he never invited anyone to his house, although Ariel often invited neighbors to barbecues in his backyard. It's hard to say how dangerous this smiling, kindly-faced Ariel was. Michelle Knight was Ariel Castro's first victim. In 2002, on August 23, Ariel decided to kidnap Michelle Knight, then 21 years old. Michelle Knight was born in 1981 and came to Cleveland. Michelle was a frequent runaway and had a history with the police. After becoming a single mother, Michelle faced the risk of losing custody of her 2-year-old child. On the day of the incident, Michelle visited a relative's house and then had to go to court, where the issue of regaining custody of her 2-year-old child had just been decided. While walking down the street, Michelle saw Ariel Castro driving up and offering her a ride. Since Michelle knew the nearby school bus driver, she didn't suspect Ariel and decided to get in his car. On the way, Ariel tells Michelle that he is taking care of puppies at home and invites Michelle to visit them and help Ariel find homes for the puppies. Michelle agrees, but as soon as she enters Ariel's house, he changes completely. Ariel becomes violent and begins hitting Michelle repeatedly. Ariel then chains her up and takes her to the basement. Over the next few days, Ariel starved Michelle and denied her water. Michelle endured constant beatings and abuse. She could not even get up and had to beg Ariel to let her go, promising not to tell anyone about it. When Michelle's mother reported her daughter missing to the police, for years the police did not prioritize the case and allocated limited resources to the investigation. Michelle's family searched for the girl themselves by contacting neighbors, friends, and concerned people. They also asked for help from Ariel, who helped post flyers around the city with Michelle's picture. However, no one knew that Michelle was being held in Ariel's basement. Ariel's second character was Amanda Berry. This girl was kidnapped in the spring of 2003. Amanda was a young girl who lived near Ariel and worked at a local restaurant. She was born on April 22, 1986 and was about to celebrate her 17th birthday. However, on April 21, 2003, Amanda mysteriously disappeared. After her shift, Amanda called home and told her sister that she would be home soon. As Amanda left the restaurant and headed to the bus stop, Ariel drove up to her and offered to give Amanda a ride home. Amanda accepted. Amanda knew Ariel's son because they had been in the same class for many years. So Amanda trusted Ariel and agreed to go with him. However, Ariel lied to her along the way, saying that Ariel needed help. When Amanda entered Ariel's house, Amanda was trapped. Ariel raped her in public, then took Amanda to the basement. There, she met Michelle, who had been kidnapped and held captive for months. Amanda was also attacked, abused, and starved for days until Amanda's body was too weak to resist. A massive search was launched after Amanda went missing. Her disappearance was widely reported in the media, and Amanda's parents appeared on popular television shows such as Oprah Winfrey and Montel Williams. They shared their story and urged anyone with information about Amanda's whereabouts to contact them immediately. On one show, famous psychic Sylvia Brown was invited on. After viewing a photo of Amanda, she said that the girl had died and her body was in the water. The words troubled Amanda's parents, but the mother, Louise Miller, continued to search for her daughter until she died in March 2006 of a heart attack. In 2012, a criminal named Robert Wolford suddenly confessed to Amanda's murder and offered to show them where her body was buried. Robert led police to a vacant lot in West Cleveland, claiming that he had buried Amanda there. However, a lengthy search failed to uncover any trace. Robert was later found to have lied for fame and television, leading to his being sentenced to an additional 5 years in prison for perjury and obstructing justice. In April 2004. This time, Ariel chose Gina De Jesus, a 14-year-old girl in his daughter's class. Ariel met Gina and another girlfriend after school. After chatting for a while, the two girls decided to go home separately. When they reached the corner of West 105th Street, Ariel met Gina and offered to take Gina home. Since Gina had known Ariel since childhood, having long been the father of her best friend, Gina got into Ariel's car without suspecting anything. Although it was daytime, there were no witnesses to the kidnapping because the streets were deserted at that time. In addition, Gina took the initiative to get into Ariel's car, so there was no easily detectable conflict. The story of Gina's disappearance was aired on Fox TV's America's Most Wanted and was re-aired twice in 2005 and 2006. Ariel also posed as a volunteer looking for missing girls. When she brought Gina home, Ariel treated Gina similarly to Michelle and Amanda. Abused, sexually assaulted, and locked in the basement. It is believed that the kidnapping was carried out by a middle-aged Hispanic man. Was seen by a passerby. There was even a sketch that looked very similar to Ariel. During the 10 years of their captivity, Ariel constantly abused her victims. They were often starved, attempting to break their spirits and destroy their self-esteem. Severe punishments were also carried out if the three girls did not comply. Michelle, the oldest captive, suffered the most. Ariel would not spare her and would often beat Michelle to intimidate the other girls, forcing them to obey without asking any questions. After years of captivity in the dark and damp basement, Ariel moved them to a room on the second floor, which overlooked the courtyard. During her captivity, Michelle became pregnant at least 5 times. However, each time she showed signs of pregnancy, Ariel brutally attempted to terminate the pregnancy, starving Michelle and kicking her in the stomach until Michelle miscarried. After one brutal torture, Michelle almost died from severe blood loss. Despite this, Ariel remained completely indifferent and refused to let her call a rescue vehicle. The girls were not allowed to bathe more than once a week. To use the toilet, they had only a bucket of water, which Ariel rarely emptied. Ariel only fed the girls once a day but constantly beat and abused them. One day, Ariel gives the girls a puppy, but a week later, Ariel brutally kills the dog in front of them as punishment for Michelle's disobedience. Gina, In 2006, Amanda realizes she is pregnant and is horrified by the image of Ariel beating her to induce a miscarriage. Ariel this time let Amanda get pregnant and give birth. In preparation for the birth, he bought a special inflatable float. In December 2006, Amanda gave birth to a daughter named Jocelyn. Although the baby was born weak, she was lucky to survive. As Jocelyn grew older, the girls began to care for her and create a close environment for her. This helped them temporarily forget the difficult situation they were in. Ariel also changed significantly after having his daughters. Ariel began giving the 3 girls he kidnapped small gifts and sometimes letting them out into the yard with Jocelyn, but always under close supervision. Jocelyn was developing well, speaking clearly, and being taught to read, write, and count by her mother. Outwardly, she appeared healthy, well cared for, and well fed. Despite being imprisoned for years under Ariel's relentless control, the victims attempted to escape many times, but each time they were brutally punished, but the girls never gave up hope. However, on May 6, 2013, Ariel left the house and forgot to lock one of the interior doors. This gave Amanda an opportunity. She left the room and went to the window that looked out onto the street. When Amanda saw a neighbor walking past the house, Amanda began banging and screaming at the window. A man heard a strange noise and stopped, thinking someone needed help. Another neighbor also heard the screams and decided to call emergency services. While waiting for the police to arrive, the men broke the lock on the front door and helped Amanda and her young daughter escape. When the police arrived, Amanda told them that her name was Amanda Berry and that she had been kidnapped 10 years ago. Amanda also said that 2 other kidnapped girls were being held in a house, in other apartments. All 3 were rescued and taken to hospital the same day. Amanda, her younger daughter Jocelyn, and Gina were not in critical condition, but Michelle had suffered severe physical and mental damage from the constant abuse. Michelle lost hearing in one ear and almost lost sight in her left eye. Many of Michelle's bones were bent and would not heal, requiring plastic surgery to restore the shape of her disfigured face. After the trauma and forced abortion, Michelle was unable to have children. When police received a report of 3 missing girls and a baby found in Ariel's home, Ariel Castro was arrested in a McDonald's parking lot just an hour later. Ariel's brothers, O'Neill and Pedro, were also arrested on suspicion of involvement, as they had been frequent visitors to Ariel's home. However, they were quickly released due to lack of evidence linking them to the case, as the victims had confirmed. Ariel was charged with forcible kidnapping, assault, battery, forcible confinement, cruelty, and taking the life of an unborn child. Ariel could have received a common law conviction. However, the prosecution required a death sentence. Ariel agreed to cooperate with the investigation and pleaded guilty. Ariel would recount all the events that took place in his home. In return, he would not be sentenced to death but instead to life in prison. Surprisingly, Ariel recalls in great detail the days of kidnapping the girls and bringing them into his home. Ariel recounted all the torture and abuse he had inflicted on his victims, but blamed the girls for unwittingly agreeing to get into Ariel's car and condemned himself to such a fate. On August 1, 2013, Ariel was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. On July 9, 2013, Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina De Jesus began a new life after being released from the Insanity's custody. After his conviction, Ariel was transferred to a rehabilitation center in Orient, Ohio, where he was closely monitored. However, on September 3, 2013, Ariel was found dead in his cell. At the time, Ariel was 53 years old. Ariel Castro's family members have apologized to the victims and their families. Michelle Knight wrote a book titled Life After Darkness: Finding Healing and Happiness After the Cleveland Kidnapping in 2018. Gina De Jesus also published a memoir titled Hope: a memoir of survival in Cleveland. There are also multiple documentary projects and 2 feature films about the terrifying kidnapping mission. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lynette White. Lynette White was a beautiful young woman from Cardiff, Wales. Due to difficult circumstances, she had to support herself through prostitution since she was 14 years old. Although this was not Lynette's childhood dream, it was the path she was forced to choose. Before her murder, Lynette had given an interview to BBC Wales journalist Tim Rogers, who was investigating child prostitution. In this conversation, Lynette shared how she had been abused, taken to Bristol, and forced into prostitution. Although Lynette managed to return to Cardiff, she was still unable to escape this dangerous life. By 1988, when Lynette was 20 years old, she had become a well-known prostitute on the streets of Cardiff. With her beautiful appearance and high regard among her friends, Lynette was one of the top prostitutes in the city. She went to work every day, earning around £100 a night. People often thought that Lynette White was trying her best to make a better life, but the reality was quite different. She worked hard just to pay for her boyfriend Stephen Miller's cocaine addiction. Every day, Stephen took large amounts of money from Lynette, who was his only source of income. Lynette and Stephen lived together in a flat on Dorset Street, Cardiff. Every day, Stephen drove Lynette to work in Riverside, Cardiff, and then went to the North Star Club in the evening to collect her earnings. Lynette's life took a new turn when Leanne, a friend of Lynette's, lent her the keys to a flat. The purpose of this was for Lynette to take clients there for sex. On the evening of February 14, 1988, Leanne went to the flat as she presumably wanted to use it. However, when she got there, Leanne found the door locked, which was quite unusual. Leanne became very concerned about Lynette and went to Butetown Police Station to report her missing. The police went with Leanne to her James Street flat. They entered the flat and found Lynette lying in a pool of her own blood. She had died from severe injuries. A post-mortem examination by forensic pathologist Bernard Knight revealed that Lynette had been stabbed more than 50 times in various parts of her body, including her chest, face, abdomen, wrists, arms, hands, and thighs. In particular, her throat had been brutally slashed from ear to ear. Although Lynette had been stabbed multiple times, her cause of death was the injury to her throat. The medical examiner determined that Lynette was murdered on February 14, between 1:45 a.m. and 4 a.m. Lynette's body was found between the foot of her bed and the window, covered in blood. An autopsy revealed that semen containing no sperm was found in Lynette's vagina and on her underwear. Additionally, 2 different blood types were found on Lynette, including her own blood and blood type AB, which was not Lynette's. After news of Lynette's death spread, police began to investigate the case further. Several witnesses reported seeing a distressed man in the area near where Lynette's body was found on James Street. The man looked suspicious and appeared to have blood on his hands. The suspicious man was described as a white man, about 5 feet 10 inches tall and in his mid-30s. Police focused their search on him and eventually arrested a man matching the description. However, he was released after providing an alibi. Police also investigated Stephen, Lynette's boyfriend, as the victim's partner is often the first suspect. Stephen was questioned but was later released because his blood type did not match the blood type found on Lynette. In addition, the police also investigated Francine Cordell and his mother because Lynette was scheduled to testify against Francine in court in an unrelated case. However, Both were also ruled out as suspects because their blood did not match the AB blood type found on Lynette. With no leads, the police had to rely on statements collected from the house-to-house investigation. In particular, two people gave suspicious statements. They were Mark Gromick, who lived in the apartment above where Lynette was murdered, and his friend, Paul Atkins. In their testimonies, Mark and Paul gave four completely different statements. Therefore, the investigators did not take these statements seriously. The police collected more statements related to Lynette's murder. Ronnie Williams, a police informant, gave statements implicating his brother-in-law, Yusef Abdullahi. However, the strained relationship between Ronnie and Yusef led the police to doubt and dismiss this account. Leanne Vilde, who reported Lynette missing on the day of her death, was also a suspect. After intense questioning, she gave a drunken statement naming Stephen and Yusef as the killers. Another eyewitness, Violet Piriam, a secretary at the Cardiff Yacht Club, shed light on the case. 8 months into the investigation, she recalled a crucial detail. On February 14th, while driving home from the club at around 1:30 a.m., she saw 4 excited black men outside the building where Lynette was killed. 2 of them, in particular, she identified as John Actie and Rashid Omar. Piriam's testimony opened a new line of inquiry into the case. Angela Sila, who has a mild intellectual disability, gave a crucial testimony. She said she saw Stephen, John, Rashid, Ronnie Actie, John's cousin Tony Paris, and Tony Brace outside 7 James Street on the day Lynette was murdered. This testimony was important because it matched Violet's testimony and further implicated Yusef, John Stephen, and others. On the same day, Mark and Paul also provided new testimony. They said they saw a group of men, including Ronnie and Yusef. Angela Sila then gave another testimony in December 1988. She said she heard screams from Lynette's flat and ran there with Leanne. Leanne gave a similar testimony on the same day, saying she went to the flat after hearing Lynette's screams and met Stephen, Yusef, Ronnie Actie, Stephen's brother, and an unnamed mixed-race man. However, Angela Sila later got into trouble. She had type AB blood, and police found her blood on Lynette's socks. Sila later gave a new confession, admitting that she was part of the murder, along with Leanne and others. Leanne also admitted that she was forced to cut Lynette's wrists to ensure her complicity and silence. With no way out, Stephen confessed to killing Lynette after 307 denials. He also named other men involved, leading to the arrest of all those accused of the murder. Specifically, the police arrested Stephen Miller, Tony Stephen, Yusef Abdullahi, Ronnie Actie, Rashid Omar, and Martin Tucker on December 7, 1988. 2 days later, John Actie and Tony Paris were also arrested. After nearly a year in custody, their trial began on October 5, 1989 at Swansea Crown Court. It was the longest murder trial in British legal history, lasting 197 days. After 2 years in custody, Ronnie Actie and John Actie were acquitted of murder. Meanwhile, Tony Paris, Stephen Miller, and Yusef Abdullahi were convicted. Each was sentenced to life imprisonment and was known as the Cardiff Three. However, there was no forensic evidence linking the men to the crime scene, which created many doubts and questions about the verdict. Friends and family of the Cardiff Three began a campaign to overturn the verdict. The campaign received widespread support and was followed up by television documentaries in 1992. The Cardiff Three's appeal was finally accepted in December 1992. After hearing Stephen's interrogation, Judge Taylor decided that the police had been abusive in their questioning of Stephen. Therefore, the veracity of Stephen's testimony was no longer important. In the end, the Cardiff Three were acquitted. Their conviction was deemed unsafe and insufficiently supported. However, if the Cardiff Three were not the real criminals, then the real criminal is still at large. This raises the question, who killed Lynette White? 8 years later, the case was reopened. This time, Professor Dave Barkley and Police Chief Kevin O'Neill were assigned to investigate. The case led the police back to the crime scene, where the incident had occurred 12 years earlier. While reviewing old photos of the crime scene, Professor Barkley discovered a crucial detail that no one else had seen all these years: a large drop of blood that might have been splattered from a knife onto the wallpaper. When the crime occurred in 1988, the police had collected several pieces of wallpaper from the apartment as evidence. Upon searching through the old evidence, they discovered that the only missing piece of wallpaper was the one containing the large drop of blood. The forensic team continued to investigate the case, carefully studying photos of the scene. They discovered that the blood might have been hidden under several layers of paint on the baseboards. The team also found traces of blood on a piece of cellophane from a cigarette packet, leading to the suspect being nicknamed Cellophane Man. To find the suspect, the forensic team led by Angela Gallup began collecting and comparing DNA data. However, searching for a matching DNA profile in 140 police databases proved futile as no matches were found. But the forensic team did not give up. They narrowed down the search to hundreds of profiles in the Cardiff area by comparing similar DNA profiles. They eventually found a match between the suspect's DNA profile and that of a 14-year-old boy who was known to the police for driving around Cardiff. Surprisingly, the boy could not be a suspect because he had not been born at the time of the crime 15 years ago. The police still visited the boy's home to investigate. There, they were told that the boy's father had died but that he had an uncle named Jeffrey Gafford. On February 26, 2003, detectives went to Jeffrey's home in the village of Hanharan, 15 miles west of Cardiff. However, Jeffrey's house was empty at the time. The next morning, police went to his workplace in an office building in Cardiff city centre. When they explained the purpose of their visit, Jeffrey said, "I think you've got someone for the job." Jeffrey was then asked to provide a mouth swab, which he agreed to do. The police immediately analyzed the swab and identified a clue that would lead to the murderer. The next morning, Superintendent Kevin O'Neill wanted to get things right so there would be no more mistakes. He assigned a team to watch Jeffrey before he began interviewing him. Chief O'Neill had planned to monitor Jeffrey for a week, but on February 28, 2003, Jeffrey attempted suicide. When the surveillance team caught him in a garage, where he had bought 3 packets of paracetamol, the police immediately took action. When the police arrived at Jeffrey's home, he had taken approximately 62 paracetamol tablets, a significant amount of painkillers. Despite this, Jeffrey tried to hide his actions. When questioned, he made a horrifying confession: "I killed Lynette White. I've been waiting for this for 15 years. I think I deserve this sentence. I really hope to die." Jeffrey was then taken to the hospital, where he once again confessed to the murder he had committed 15 years earlier. Initially refusing treatment, Jeffrey prepared himself to accept death. But he eventually agreed to take the antidote and recovered within a few days. On July 4, 2003, Jeffrey pleaded guilty to the murder of Lynette White in court. Judge Royce sentenced Jeffrey to life imprisonment with a minimum of 12 years and 8 months. Jeffrey's lawyer later revealed that Jeffrey had killed Lynette for over 30 pounds and had sexually assaulted her body. In February 2007, Paul Atkins, Angela Sila, Leanne Vilde, and Mark Gromick were charged with perjury. By December 2008, 3 of them, Angela Sila, Leanne Vilde, and Mark Gromick, were convicted and each sentenced to 18 months in prison. However, Paul Atkins was acquitted because it was believed he had been bullied, threatened, abused, and manipulated into making false statements. In March 2009, it was announced that the prosecution had enough evidence to charge the officers involved in the original investigation for conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. However, In 2011, the trial was dropped due to a lack of evidence. In 2015, 8 of the accused officers brought a civil suit in the High Court against the police force, suing for malicious prosecution, unlawful detention, and wrongful conduct. However, in late 2015, the judge in the civil case dismissed their case. 5 of the wrongfully accused men were awarded compensation after their release. Stephen Miller was paid £571,000, John Actie received £300,000, while Tony Paris was awarded £250,000. 2 other men, Ron Actie and Yusuf Abdullahi, have since died. Ronnie Actie died in 2007 after struggling to come to terms with what had happened to him. Yusuf Abdullahi died in 2011 from cancer after battling post-traumatic stress disorder. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Neha Varma. Megha Deshpande lived with her 21-year-old daughter, Ashlesha, and her 70-year-old mother, Rohini, in a luxurious neighborhood called Srinagar in Indore. This city known for consistently ranking as one of the cleanest in India. The fact that they resided in Srinagar, an area predominantly inhabited by the wealthy, suggested that the Deshpande family was financially well off. Megha worked for a multi-level marketing (MLM) company for a considerable time. MLM is also referred to as network marketing, direct selling, and pyramid selling. To understand how an MLM business works, imagine a pyramid structure. At the top is the company owner. When the owner recruits 2 individuals, and they join the company, it creates a network. These 2 individuals then recruit more people to join the company, and the process continues. The company generates profit from each new member or associate that joins, allowing the business owner to constantly earn income through the growth of their network. Before moving to Indore, Megha lived in Yuan, a city approximately 35 miles away, with her husband, Nanai Deshpande. However, due to his job as a bank manager, Nanai remained in Yuan, while Megha relocated to Indore with her daughter and mother a few months ago. Thanks to Nanai's stable job and Megha's successful career in the MLM company, the Megha's family has a stable financial situation and does not have to worry about money. In the neighborhood where Megha lives, people are very united, and it is also very safe with very little crime. Residents have always felt safe, and nothing unusual has ever happened there until June 13, 2011, when that all changed. On that day, no one in Megha's family left the house until noon, and no one heard their voices. A neighbor walked by Megha's house, and then she noticed a very strange thing. Footprints made of bloody stains led around the house, alarming her. She quickly notified the landlord, and the landlord then knocked on the door several times, but received no answer. Next, the landlord attempted to look inside through a window and was met with a very scary sight. 3 women were lying on the floor, their bodies covered in blood. Overcome with fear, he quickly alerted the police. The brutal murder of the Megha family members sent shockwaves through the community. By the time the police arrived at the crime scene, a large crowd had gathered outside their house. Upon entering the house, the police officers were met with a gruesome scene: the bodies of 3 women who had been brutally murdered. The police secured the crime scene and began their investigation. During this process, they found 2 bullet shells inside the house. One of the shells was linked to the gunshot wound that killed Megha, who had been shot in the head. However, despite a thorough search of the house lobby, the police were unable to locate the second bullet. A forensic team was called in to collect evidence from the crime scene. The bodies of the 3 women were then sent for post-mortem examination. As news of the murder spread, the entire city of Indore was left reeling in shock. The post-mortem report later revealed that 21-year-old Ashlesha and her 70-year-old grandmother, Rohini, had died from excessive bleeding caused by multiple stab wounds inflicted on their bodies. This report confirms that Murdaugh was the only one shot to death. However, it raises a crucial question for the police: if 2 bullet shells were found, who was the second shot intended for? Murdaugh's husband, along with the public, also started pressuring the police, demanding that they solve the case quickly so that the criminals are held accountable to the fullest extent of Indian law. This makes it even more urgent for the police to solve this case quickly. To do this, several teams were deployed to investigate. One team analyzed the call detail records of the 3 victims, Murdaugh, Ashlesha, Rohini. Another team re-examined the forensic evidence. Initially, the police have collected a blood sample from the crime scene that didn't belong to Murdaugh, Ashlesha, or Rohini. The police then detained and questioned various suspects from the surrounding area. Based on the evidence collected, the police have recorded this as a robbery and murder case. Further investigation of the phone records revealed that there was a phone number that had called Murdaugh multiple times, and she had long conversations with this number. After obtaining detailed information about the number, the police found it was registered to a girl named Neha. They then began tracking her location to gather potential leads in the case. One day, the police located Neha near an ATM in the area. They promptly sent a team to bring her to the police station for questioning. After being informed of the situation of the case, Neha was left astounded. She explained that she initially met Murdaugh at a shopping mall. Then, Neha had bumped into Murdaugh while rushing, causing Murdaugh to drop some items. As Neha apologized and helped Murdaugh gather her belongings, they engaged in conversation and developed a rapport. And Neha even driving Murdaugh to her car, marking the start of their friendship. Neha also discovered that Murdaugh worked for a multi-level marketing, MLM, company. After exchanging phone numbers, they occasionally spoke over the phone. Neha's interest in the MLM business model led her to discuss it with Murdaugh. However, the police found Neha's story suspicious, as her words didn't match her body language. As a result, the police questioned her forcefully and in a confrontational manner. Neha initially tries to hide her dishonesty, but under intense police questioning, she confesses. She then told the police a story that even surprised them. Neha Varma was a 23-year-old beautician who was known for her beauty and cheerful personality. Her father, a van driver, had limited financial resources, making it challenging for Neha to pursue her dreams. During this time, Neha met Rahul, and they developed a close friendship that blossomed into romance. At 24, Rahul was handsome but also struggled financially. Despite their similar financial situations, they deeply loved each other and wanted to get married. They sought opportunities to rapidly build wealth and achieve a comfortable lifestyle, securing their financial future. Neha and Murdaugh met for the first time. Murdaugh, who had a taste for expensive jewelry, was wearing gold ornaments that day. Neha perceived Murdaugh as wealthy due to her jewelry and decided to approach her. Neha started approaching Murdaugh by deliberately bumping into her, start chatting and befriending her. Neha started thinking about robbing Murdaugh after getting to call her through phone calls. Neha then shared her plan with her boyfriend Rahul, telling him that Murdaugh was extremely wealthy, making her an easy target. Rahul liked the idea, as it would solve their financial problems and allow them to live comfortably once they were married. Following this, Rahul started making plans to kill Murdaugh and the 2 other women in her house. He thought that if he could get away with the crime without anyone finding out, no one would be able to file a complaint against them. Rahul finalized his plan but needed a gun to carry it out. Luckily for him, his friend Manoj, who was close to both Rahul and Neha, had a gun. Rahul had been planning to kill Murdaugh and her family, and he was waiting for the perfect moment to execute his plan. That moment arrived on June 13, 2011. On that day, Neha called Murdaugh and expressed interest in joining her multi-level marketing scheme, MLM. Unbeknownst to Murdaugh, this was a ruse orchestrated by Rahul. Neha arrived at Murdagh's house early in the morning, and Murdaugh asked her to fill out a membership form. However, Neha didn't know what information to fill in the form, so she asked Murdaugh if she could get a friend arrive to help her. Murdaugh agreed, and Neha then called Rahul, as planned. Rahul and his accomplice, Manoj, were waiting for Neha's call, and they immediately went to Murdagh's house. Once Rahul entered the house, he pulled out a gun and shot Murdaugh at point-blank range, killing her instantly. The sound of this gunshot reached Ashlesha and Rohini, causing both of them to run into the lobby. Rahul and Manoj initially intimidated Ashlesha and her grandmother Rohini, demanding Ashlesha's ATM card and PIN in exchange for their lives. Ashlesha, hoping to be spared, quickly handed over the card. However, Rahul and Manoj were aware that they had been seen, and this posed a risk to their. To eliminate witnesses, Rahul attempted to shoot Ashlesha but accidentally shot himself in the foot instead. Manoj then took a knife and brutally murdered both Ashlesha and Rohini. After the killings, the three thieves, including Neha, Rahul, Manoj, stole approximately 1 million Indian rupees and valuable jewelry worth up to $500,000 rupees and Ashlesha's ATM card. Rahul, along with Neha and Manoj, had planned to use the ATM card to withdraw cash. However, their plan failed when Neha was arrested by the police. Rahul to file an untrue report at the police station and was arrested, but was later hospitalized due to gunshot wounds. The police matched Rahul's blood sample from the crime scene to one taken from him. It was a match. The police quickly solved the case and arrested the suspects. Following a prolonged and contentious court case, the three defendants, Neha, Rahul, Manoj, were sentenced to death by hanging in December 2013. The district court handed down this severe punishment due to the heinous nature of the crime, in which the defendants killed women from 3 generations of the Murdaugh family. Physical evidence, including blood-stained clothing, knives, and jewelry, was recovered from the defendants by the police. One of the defendants, Neha, is currently serving her sentence in the central jail. Notably, she has been teaching a beauty parlor course to fellow female inmates while incarcerated. This case was notable for being the first time the district court had imposed a death sentence on a woman. Neha and Rahul's desire for quick wealth led them to get involved in a life of crime. It is fortunate that the perpetrators were caught. If Murdaugh had not worn her valuable jewelry to the mall and had not trusted a stranger she met there, the outcome may have been different. Murdaugh's husband, Nana Deshpande, was pleased with the court's decision and praised the judiciary and the police for their efforts. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Peter Tobin. Peter Britton Tobin was born on August 27, 1946, in Johnstone, Scotland. He was the youngest of 8 children born to Marjorie and Daniel Tobin. From an early age, Peter displayed an impulsive personality, prompting his parents to send him to boarding school in 1953 when he was only 7 years old. However, this did not work, and he was sent to a reformatory. After completing his time there, he moved to Brighton, England. There, Peter began a relationship with Margaret Mount, a young typist who was attracted to his personality. They married in August 1969, but soon, Peter's ruthless, controlling, and abusive personality manifested itself. Not only that, Peter also became involved in criminal activities. A year later, he was convicted and imprisoned in England for theft and counterfeiting. Margaret decided to divorce him in 1973. Peter then married Sylvia Jeffrey, a 30-year-old local nurse, who was also attracted to his charm. That year, they had their first son, Ian, and a year later, a daughter, Claire, who unfortunately died shortly after birth. Sylvia was devastated by the loss of her child, became a victim of Peter's abuse, and decided to leave in 1976, taking their young son with her. Years later, when he was in his 40s, Peter was ready for a new romantic relationship. This time, he chose Kathy Wilson, a sensitive, naive, and impressionable 16-year-old girl. This made it easy for Peter to start a relationship with Kathy. The two moved in together, and soon after, their son, Daniel, was born. They married in 1989 and moved to Scotland. This was a difficult time for Kathy. Her husband was controlling, preventing her from going out and becoming increasingly violent. Eventually, Kathy bravely decided to run away with her son in the late 1990s. Kathy's departure brought out the worst in Peter. After Kathy left, Peter met a gentle girl named Vicky Hamilton. Vicky was born in Scotland in 1976 and was the second child of Michael and Janet Hamilton. She had 3 siblings, Sharon, Lee, and Lindsay. However, arguments arose between Peter and Vicky and they quickly divorced. Vicky, Lee, and Lindsay lived with their mother and moved to South London. Sharon still lives in Bath, but this did not prevent Vicky and Sharon from maintaining the same close relationship as before. The evening of February 10th was cold and snowy. On a hangout with Sharon, Vicky checked her fare and went over the bus route with Sharon. They hugged goodbye. At the bus stop, while eating a bag of chips, Vicky met Peter. He pulled Vicky into his car, raped her, and then killed her. When Vicky failed to visit her mother's house, and there was no news of her, her family began to search for her. They reported her disappearance to the police. As the police investigated the case, Vicky's image became prominent across Scotland, and the search for her became one of the largest in the country's history. The runaway theory was reinforced on February 21, 1991, when Vicky's purse was found near the main bus station in Edinburgh. It was, in fact, a false clue planted by Peter to throw investigators off track. The attempt was successful, sending the investigation off track. Detectives spent 2 months searching London unsuccessfully. It was then revealed that Vicky's mother had died. Over the next 10 years, Vicky's family and townspeople continued to pursue the case, but with more than 7,000 names on file, nearly 4,000 statements taken, some 500 documents and 380 potential physical evidence, all to no avail. The case was eventually dropped. The next young woman to have Peter's misfortune was Dinah McNichol, an Essex native with a brother and 3 sisters. Her father was a jazz musician and her mother had died in a car accident many years earlier. At 18, Dinah was a kind, cheerful girl and a great friend. She had just graduated from high school and had high hopes for the future. She was torn between taking a year off to travel or going to college, but she was undecided. On the first weekend of August 1991, Dinah attended a music festival in Hampshire. There, she met a boy named David Tremlett. They quickly fell in love. On Sunday, August 4th, they spent the night together in a tent. The next day, Dinah helped him take down the tent and they agreed to each hitchhike home. As they were both tired, Peter showed up and offered to give them a ride. David got out of the car first, and Dinah saved Peter's number before parting ways. Alone with the strange driver, the girl was about to face a real nightmare. On Monday, August 5, 1991, he did the same to her as he had done to Vicky. Dinah's scarf became a crime tool. After the crime, Peter withdrew money from Dinah's account at ATMs in Hampshire and Sussex. When Dinah's family saw the withdrawals from her account, they immediately suspected something was wrong. They knew she had carefully saved every penny and planned to use it for travel or education. As the days passed, the family lived in fear and uncertainty, which was the worst thing. Although no one said it, everyone believed that something terrible had happened. If Dinah were still alive, she would have returned home or called to explain her absence. As for Peter, he left Margate without saying goodbye or explaining anything. In 1993, he settled in Hampshire, renting a flat in Leek Park, saying he wanted to be closer to his son. On August 4, 1993, two 14-year-old girls went to visit Dinah but did not see her. So they asked the neighbors if anyone had seen Dinah, which led to them knocking on Peter's door. Peter invited the two girls into his house, ostensibly to wait for Dinah. They saw his friendly 5-year-old son and agreed without suspicion. While the child was asleep, Peter began to torment the two girls. He threatened them with a knife and forced them to drink alcohol, then beat and raped them. One of the girls was seriously injured. Fortunately, the child woke up in time and saved them from the same terrible fate as the two previous victims. Peter wanted to hide the truth from his son, so he decided to leave the apartment with the child. Before leaving at around 2 a.m., he turned on the gas stove to complete his monstrous plan. However, the two girls were lucky to wake up and escape. They went to the police and reported everything that had happened. After that, Peter returned the child to his mother and joined a sect called the Jesus Fellowship under a false name. But the media published his photo, provided by the police, and his face became widely known. With the help of BBC Crime Watch, Peter was finally arrested after 40 days on the run in Brighton. Peter appeared in court on May 18, 1994 and pleaded guilty to sexual assault and indecent assault on two young girls. As a result, he was sentenced to 14 years in prison. However, Peter was released in 2014 at the age of 58 without serving the full sentence. After his release, Peter returned to Scotland with the aim of hiding in the same area to avoid being identified as a sex offender. He evaded capture for a long time until 2006. During this time, Peter used a false name and posed as a homeless person. He sought refuge at St. Patrick's Cathedral in Glasgow. Under the name Peter McLaughlin, Peter approached a charity couple from the church group, Dennis and Katie Curran. Katie still felt uneasy about Peter despite his frail appearance. On the other hand, having been raised Catholic, Peter felt comfortable in the church. He begged there, which helped him gain sympathy from the parishioners. This gave Peter the freedom to move around unnoticed and provided him with an ideal hiding place. Here, Peter met Angelica Kluck, a 23-year-old girl from Poland. She came to Scotland in the summer of 2006 to work and pay for her language lessons. Angelica was living in the rectory of St. Patrick's Church and doing cleaning work. Peter took an immediate liking to Angelica and convinced her to help him with various tasks. On Sunday, September 24, 2006, Angelica helped Peter paint a shed. Some parishioners saw them together. But unexpectedly, Peter attacked Angelica at the back of the chapel. Leica Brown, 47, and her husband, Andrew, 46, were at home when they heard a woman screaming through an open window. Leica described the scream as a short, loud sound, like someone being forcibly restrained. The scream made her nervous and she got up from her chair, but when she got to the window, she couldn't see anything. Hours passed and the parishioners noticed that Angelica was no longer there. That was when Dennis and Katie quickly reported the unusual disappearance to the police. The police immediately began investigating and interviewed every member of the community. During these interviews, it was discovered that the last person anyone saw with Angelica was Peter, albeit under the guise of a homeless. He eventually became the prime suspect and the police came to question him, but found no evidence. The investigation continued. Peter knew that it was only a matter of time before they found the body and traced it back to him, so he fled to London. By this time, Detective David Swindle had joined the investigation and began to suspect that this might not just be a disappearance. Everything they found, as well as the testimonies they gathered, made him think that Angelica was unlikely to be found alive. Finally, on September 29, 2006, authorities discovered the body in the chapel. This news shocked British society, especially because of the location chosen by the perpetrator to hide the body. Looking at the injuries sustained by the girl, Detective David suspected that the perpetrator was not acting for the first time. However, there was more news to come. The DNA found at the crime scene and on the victim's body matched the data in the United Kingdom's National Criminal Intelligence Database. That's when they learned that the man they were looking for was Peter Tobin, whose fingerprints were also found at the crime scene. The first step for the authorities was to publish his photograph in the media. His image was also sent nationwide for distribution and the Scottish police contacted the Metropolitan Police, initiating a search throughout the United Kingdom. Meanwhile, Peter, who was in London, tried to hide in a place where he believed he wouldn't be sought. He went to a hospital, pretending to have heart problems, claiming to have chest pain and weakness on the left side of his body. He identified himself as a plumber and called himself James Kelly. He was examined by Dr. Nick Lasso, who conducted several tests. However, something in his demeanor and behavior made the doctor uncomfortable. Initially, he avoided eye contact, which was unusual for a patient. Then, when the tests didn't reveal any physical reasons for the pain he claimed to be experiencing, the doctor became suspicious. His suspicions were confirmed by a nurse who recognized Peter from a photograph circulating in the media. As a result, both the nurse and the doctor contacted the police. This phone call changed the entire dynamic of the investigation. On September 30th, police officer Alan Murray was dispatched to the hospital in London. Peter was taken to a room and Alan went to talk to him. He was immediately arrested. Although initially, he was charged only with a violation of the sex offender registry, this thing allowed the officers to buy time to prepare a criminal case against him. Evidence gathered by the police team led by Detective David led to Peter's trial for the crimes committed against Angelica in late March 2007. Despite all the evidence against him, Peter denied committing any violent acts against the young woman. However, in an attempt to shift blame for the rape, he claimed that they engaged in consensual sexual activity. Peter also denied providing false information to the police and hospital staff. After 6 weeks of legal proceedings, his lies and manipulations proved futile as he was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 21 years. Detective David and his team suspected that there were more mysteries to Peter's story. During the trial, the detectives further investigated Peter's life, gathered more evidence and built a profile with the cooperation of various law enforcement agencies. To avoid affecting the case involving Angelica, they chose to carry out their work discreetly and carefully. The joint police investigation was called Anagram. Investigators identified links between the disappearances and locations that Peter had visited. The investigation revealed 2 exact links, one in Bathgate and one in Margate. A search was then carried out at Peter's old house on the coast and they found a knife with traces of DNA hidden in the attic. However, no other findings were made at the location. Investigators then visited the house where he lived in Margate and established that he was a dangerous serial offender. A search of the house revealed a secret grave in the garden that he had created for his son. Investigators dug up a sand pit in the garden and found the body of a woman. Further searches at the same location uncovered another body. A woman's handbag was found at the crime scene and was collected for DNA analysis. As well as identifying the two victims, the handbag was also analyzed. Although the handbag clearly contained DNA, there was no match in the National DNA Database. However, on June 1, 2007, investigators found a DNA match to Peter's fingerprints. This was a vital lead, and they decided to pursue this line of investigation. On November 14, 2007, the authorities confirmed that one of the bodies was that of Vicky Hamilton, who had gone missing at the age of 15. Her family had waited 16 years for any information about her. They later identified the second body as that of 18-year-old Dinah McNichol, who was hitchhiking home after attending a concert. On September 1, 2008, the Crown Prosecution Service charged Peter with Vicky's murder, leading to his trial. When Vicky's father, Michael, saw Peter, he was restrained by the police, as at that point he just wanted Peter to know that he was there to defend his daughter's honor and remember her. Peter faced sentencing after a month of trial on December 2, 2008, when he was convicted of Vicky's murder and sentenced to life in prison. A year later, in December 2009, Dinah's trial took place. On December 16, due to the defense's failure to provide evidence to exonerate his client, the jury found Peter guilty of Dinah's murder. As a result, he was given an additional life sentence. 5 months before his trial, a report on November 22, 2007, stated that Peter Tobin had been attacked by fellow inmates in prison, but he only suffered minor injuries. During the investigation, Peter Tobin also confessed to a total of 11 murders. Peter died in hospital on October 8, 2022. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Kristen Rossum. Ralph and Constance Rossum were dedicated parents to their 3 children, prioritizing their kids' development and well-being above all else. Their children were educated from a young age, attended good schools, and they encouraging their children to explore their interests through a variety of extracurricular activities. However, their daughter Kristen struggled to cope with the pressure of living up to family expectations. Feeling overwhelmed and desperate to escape, Kristen began to rebel by lying, skipping school, and finding ways to escape her temporary problems. At first, she felt more comfortable when she drank alcohol, but over time, the effects of alcohol stopped being effective for her. As a result, she turned to the controlled substance methamphetamine and eventually became dependent on it. Methamphetamine, commonly referred to as meth, is widely considered the most addictive illicit substance in the United States. Its use often leading to paranoia, impaired judgment, and euphoria. Kristen's parents noticed her erratic behavior and, in a conversation, discovered she'd been struggling with the substance since high school. Her entire family, who were highly educated, were shocked and deeply affected by this behavior. After months of conflict with her parents, 17-year-old Kristen secretly ran away. While vacationing in Mexico with friends, she met a tall, handsome man named Gregory de Villers, who was 7 years her senior. Over time, they fell in love with each other. He helped her get settled and get her health back. With Gregory's support, she turned her life around by getting a job at the local forensic service as a toxicology assistant. Her skills impressed the employer and her addiction was forgotten. As a forensic assistant, Kristen graduated from college with honors. Her teachers and employers praised her and gave her the Best Student Award without knowing the reason why she loved her chosen profession. After 5 years of dating Gregory, they had their grand wedding on June 5, 1999. Kristen's parents loved Gregory dearly and were relieved that their daughter had overcome the pain of her past and was now on the path toward a bright and fulfilling future. In March 2000, Kristen was hired by the San Diego County Medical Examiner's Office as a toxicologist, specializing in analyzing body fluids for narcotics. Gregory was working in the biotechnology industry at the time. But Kristen soon grew tired of her dull and monotonous life, and she began to look for excitement elsewhere. She met a new co-worker, Michael Robertson, who had just been appointed as the department head. Although Michael was married, they unexpectedly developed strong feelings for each other. They couldn't keep their relationship a secret for long. Gregory discovered many love letters between his wife and Michael. The marriage relationship was getting worse, yet Gregory remained hopeful that it could be salvaged. Understanding his wife's weakness, he made an effort to support and rescue her from her difficulties, hoping to mend their relationship. This time Kristen did not want to be saved. She asked for a divorce on Monday morning, November 6, 2000. Kristen was getting ready for work as usual. Gregory was sick and at home. Kristen was very tired worrying about her husband. In the days after their breakup talk, he was indifferent and unusually calm. Kristen informed Gregory's workplace that he was sick, and then she also visited her husband during her lunch break. Gregory fell asleep at 9:22 p.m. That same day, Kristen called the emergency services to report that her husband Gregory was not breathing. He had most likely committed suicide as he was home alone. Kristen was crying on the phone and she lost her temper, so she did not listen to the dispatcher's instructions about performing an autopsy and performing first aid on her husband. Police and paramedics arrived at the scene at 10:19 p.m. Gregory was pronounced dead. He was lying on the bedroom floor with his torso exposed, surrounded by scattered rose petals. An examination of the room revealed evidence suggesting that Gregory taking a fatal amount of multiple prescription medications. Empty painkiller bottles were scattered around the room, and torn wedding photos were found on his bed. When questioned, Kristen said she told Gregory she wanted to separate the night before, just over a year after their wedding. She felt regret about the marriage, thinking they rushed into it too quickly. Kristen also found Gregory too controlling and she wanted more space. Gregory's death was initially ruled a suicide, caused by a powerful sedative. Kristen signed the cremation papers, but Gregory's family and friends were skeptical. They had noticed no changes in his personality or mood, and they believed he would never use those fatal drugs. The family's doubts led them to try to stop the cremation and request an autopsy. Their persistence eventually led investigators to consider the possibility that Gregory's death was not a suicide, but a murder. An investigation into Gregory's death revealed the fentanyl, a painkiller 150 times more potent than morphine, along with smaller amounts of other substances including clonazepam and trace. Initially, the cause of death was suspected to be an overdose of oxycodone, often referred to as heroin, but further investigation pointed to fentanyl as the lethal dose. A substance can provide pain relief and produce a feeling of euphoria. However, it can also slow down breathing and be fatal if not treated in time. Because of the strong effects of clonazepam and other substances found in Gregory's body, investigators speculate that someone else intentionally gave him a fatal dose of fentanyl. Kristen became the prime suspect due to her extensive knowledge and access to powerful prescription medications like fentanyl. During questioning, Kristen's disheveled appearance and history of substance abuse raised suspicions about her potential involvement in Gregory's death. Her own testimony revealed inconsistencies on the day her husband died. Initially, Kristen told medical staff that he was not taking any medications, but later changed her statement to suggest that he may have taken oxycodone at the hospital. The change in her story, combined with her knowledge and access to powerful prescription drugs, supported the argument that Kristen was involved in her husband's death. On November 8, the police received a call from Russ Lowe, a coworker of Kristen's. Russ revealed that Kristen was having an affair with her boss. Further investigation uncovered evidence of Kristen's relationship with her boss, Michael. This evidence consisted of affectionate emails and computer documents. Notably, the documents also revealed Michael's knowledge of phenyl, a substance that later became significant in the murder case. Kristen and Michael's relationship became a key aspect of the investigation. It is suspected that Gregory became a threat to Michael and Kristen because he knew that Kristen had access to the laboratory and that she had secretly used narcotics. Michael covered for Kristen, supporting her actions. During the investigation, Michael admitted to being aware of Kristen's drug addiction at the time. Although no charges were filed against Michael and Kristen, but they were both fired for violating several rules. Kristen's troubles started in January, when police searched her home for evidence of drug use. Initially, she was arrested but later released on bail. A new proof shed light on the investigation: Kristen's diary, uncovered during the initial examination. Kristen didn't write the diary for personal reflection, but rather as a way to present herself to others and maintain her innocence, while making her husband Gregory's death look like a perfect suicide. Notably, on the day of his death, Kristen bought a rose to pair with lingerie that suggested infidelity. A medical examination of Gregory's body revealed that he had been unconscious for at least 6 hours before his death. The estimated time of death was likely about an hour to an hour and a half before it was officially confirmed. Furthermore, bruises were found around the needle marks on his arm. During the investigation, a short supply of the lethal substance was discovered at Kristen's workplace, along with other narcotic substances. A suspicious vial of phenyl was also found, leading police to suspect that Kristen had poisoned Gregory without his knowledge. Kristen was arrested on June 25, 2001, and charged with first-degree murder. After spending 6 months in custody, she was released on bail. The prosecution's main argument in her first trial centered around the motive for the murder. They claimed that Kristen killed Gregory to protect her reputation because he threatened to expose her drug addiction and her affair with Michael. The prosecution alleged that Kristen used a powerful synthetic opioid called fentanyl to poison Gregory. Fentanyl is 80 times more potent than morphine. It was suggested that Kristen initially attempted to kill Gregory with a different substance, clonazepam, but when this failed, she used fentanyl. To make it seem like Gregory had taken his own life, Kristen staged the scene by ripping out pages from her diary and placing personal items, including rose petals and a wedding photograph, around his body. As a biochemistry graduate, Kristen leveraged her knowledge of chemistry and drugs to orchestrate Gregory's death. The prosecution also claimed that Kristen deliberately withheld information about the fentanyl from her colleagues in the medical examiner's office, aiming to mislead them into believing Gregory's death was self-inflicted before his autopsy. The developments of what happened that day are reproduced as follows. On the morning of November 6th, she contacted Gregory's workplace to report his absence, then headed to her workplace. Her colleagues stated that around 9 a.m., she began her workday. However, they recalled finding her crying in their Michael's office about an hour later. The manager of the apartment building where Kristen and Gregory were staying witnessed Kristen returning home at 12:10 p.m. Shortly after, at 12:41 p.m., Kristen went to a nearby grocery store and bought various items. Among these purchases was a credit card statement. This confirmed her emergence at the store several hours before Gregory's death. Additionally, Kristen made multiple phone calls to Michael. The San Diego County medical examiner, Dr. Blackburn, who performed Gregory's autopsy, testified that Gregory had been deceased for at least an hour by the time paramedics arrived. The examiner also disclosed that Gregory was suffering from early-stage bronchopneumonia at the time of death. Breathing difficulties occur when lung secretions accumulate, often as a result of poor breathing. This can happen when a person is unconscious or taking very shallow breaths. Dr. Blackburn presented additional evidence, stating that Gregory's body contained a significant amount of urine in his bladder at the time of death. This accumulation would have caused severe discomfort if Gregory was conscious, suggesting he likely struggled to breathe for 6 to 12 hours before his death. Furthermore, Dr. Blackburn found it unlikely that Gregory, in an unconscious state, could have scattered rose petals on himself. During the trial, Dr. Blackburn also testified that the level of clonazepam in Gregory's blood was not high enough to be considered an overdose, and therefore would not have been the cause of death. Dr. Theodore Stanley, testifying for the prosecution, stated that fentanyl, a powerful and fast-acting painkiller, can have severe side effects leading to respiratory arrest. The onset of its effects varies based on the administration method. The fastest method of maximal effect is intravenous administration, which occurs within about 5 minutes. Intramuscular injection results in maximum effect within 15 to 20 minutes. This is followed by oral administration, with maximum effect within 20 to 30 minutes. The slowest method of maximal effect is the transdermal patch, which takes about 16 hours. Dr. Theodore testified before the court that fentanyl is typically not taken orally because the liver breaks down approximately 65% of the substance. As a result, only 35% of fentanyl is able to enter the bloodstream. However, when questioned about how fentanyl was detected in Gregory's body, neither Dr. Blackburn nor Dr. Theodore was able to provide a clear explanation. Dr. Theodore found that the amounts of fentanyl in Gregory's body, combined with the fact that Gregory had been unconscious and breathing shallowly for hours before his death, suggested that the fentanyl may have been given to Gregory by someone else. During the trial, the prosecution had difficulty explaining to the jury exactly how Kristen poisoned her husband. However, there was evidence that she may have applied a fentanyl patch to Gregory's arm while he was sleeping. Kristen's former workplace provided a crucial piece of evidence, as 15 fentanyl patches were discovered missing from the lab. While Kristen maintained her innocence, her defense team accepted that fentanyl was the cause of Gregory's death, but they suggested an alternative explanation. According to the defense, Gregory intentionally gave himself a fatal dose due to feelings of desperation about family problems. In court, Kristen recounted her of events on the morning of November 6. She recalled waking up to find Gregory in a state of distress. Gregory called his employer at 7:42 a.m. to report his illness and informed them that he would not be going to work. Kristen claimed she left for work, but returned to their apartment during her lunch break to check on Gregory. When she asked him why he was so upset, Gregory replied that he was feeling unwell due to taking oxycodone and clonazepam and planned to stay home and rest. Kristen returned to work after that and came home around 8 p.m. Upon arrival, she found Gregory in bed and assumed he was asleep. She went to take a shower, and when came out, she tried to wake him, but when she touched him she felt cold. Kristen then immediately called emergency services. During questioning, the prosecutor questioned the validity of Kristen's explanation. She admitted to lying in the past and lying about her drug use, which made her testimony seem suspect. Autopsy and toxicology results showed that Gregory had been unconscious for approximately 6 to 8 hours before his death, contradicting Kristen's initial claim that they had lunch together that day. The defense argued that the concentration of clonazepam in Gregory's blood was not fatal on its own. However, they acknowledged that the combined effects of oxycodone, an opiate, and clonazepam, a benzodiazepine, could be more potent than the effects of either substance alone. They suggested that Gregory may have accidentally taken the drugs, but they could not explain why the high concentration of fentanyl was found in his body, which remains unexplained. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found Kristen guilty of first-degree murder and special circumstance murder due to poisoning. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Kristen claimed innocence and appealed the verdict in the appellate court, where a critical mistake by her own defense team was discovered. Her lawyers had admitted that fentanyl caused the death but failed to test the autopsy samples for fentanyl metabolites. This important test will help determine whether Gregory ingested fentanyl and whether the fentanyl in his body was due to contamination from laboratory testing rather than what he actually ate in. If fentanyl was only detected in the samples and not in Gregory's body, the prosecution's theory that fentanyl caused his death would be incorrect. The appeal also revealed a chain of custody violation regarding the samples. Although the samples were marked and placed in a cardboard box, the containers were not sealed. They were left at the medical examiner's office for approximately 36 hours before being shipped to the sheriff's forensic lab due to the recipient's absence. During this time, the samples were potentially accessible to anyone with a key to the medical examiner's office building, raising concerns that someone may have contaminated the samples. Kristen's appeal contends that any individual with a motive to falsify evidence could have added the substance to the sample. A panel of judges from the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals reviewed Kristen's case and concluded that her lawyers had made a serious error. The prosecution claimed Gregory died of a fentanyl overdose. Kristen's lawyers, however, did not contest that claim. Instead, they accepted the fentanyl overdose explanation. The judges did not overturn the verdict but sent the case back to the lower court to decide whether the defense's error could have changed the outcome of the trial. The U.S. Supreme Court has issued a ruling stating that federal courts must respect the decisions made by state courts in similar cases. This ruling impacts Kristen's case, as the court has voted against a hearing and her appeal was denied, leaving her in custody. Kristen's trial was not the only part of the case. She had a co-defendant named Michael. Although he was not in the U.S. for the trial, he is still a part of the case and risks being arrested if he returns. However, he may be eligible for a $100,000 bail. Michael has been living in Australia, where he works as a forensic toxicologist. Kristen Rossum was arrested in 2003 and received a life sentence without parole. Gregory's family is now suing the county for allowing Kristen to steal a lethal dose of the same drug without detection, and they blame the county's negligence for her crime. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Teresa Halbach. Teresa was born on March 22, 1980, to parents Richard and Karen Halbach. She was the youngest of 5 siblings, and the family she lived on a dairy farm. When Teresa was 8 years old, tragedy struck as her father passed away, leaving Karen to care for the family alone. Karen later married her Richard's brother, Thomas, and together they raised their blended family. Teresa is an adventurous and nature-loving individual who dreamed of becoming a National Geographic photojournalist. She excelled academically, graduating summa cum laude from the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay with a degree in photography. After college, Teresa continued her work with Pierce Photography, a company where she had interned during her studies. She also launched her own business, Photography by Teresa, operating from the Pierce studio. Teresa traveled extensively for her work and to supplement her income. She took on freelance photography jobs for Auto Trader magazine, photographing vehicles for sale. Tragically, this job ultimately resulted in her premature death. All evidence pointed to a single suspect, Stephen Avery. He had contacted Teresa to schedule a photo shoot of his sister's minivan. According to records, Teresa was last seen at 2:30 p.m. that afternoon. This was later confirmed by Stephen's nephew, Bobby, who told the police that he saw Teresa's car enter the salvage yard. Stephen was originally charged with using a gun on November 11, 2005. Subsequent charges included the murder of Teresa Halbach, her kidnapping, and the mutilation of her body. However, While being investigated for these crimes, the police found blood in the SUV Teresa's that matched Stevens. In his room, they discovered a set of car keys belonging to Teresa. Throughout the investigation, he insisted that the police were attempting to frame him. Steven was born on July 9, 1962, in Wisconsin, where he grew up with his parents Dolores and Alan, and siblings Charles, Earl, and Barbara. However, he had a troubled past, having dropped out of high school with a reported IQ of 70. In 1981, he was jailed for 10 months after breaking into a bar. In the following year, he was found guilty of animal cruelty for brutally killing his pet cat. The cat was doused with gasoline and set on fire, resulting in a 9-month prison sentence. Steven had a record of behaving violently in the past, including an incident where he threatened his cousin, Sharon Morris. He chased her off the street and pointed a gun at her, claiming that she was spreading false rumors about him. Although Steven received a 6-year sentence for this crime, but then he was given bail. However, an incident led to his wrongful imprisonment for nearly 2 decades. Henny Bernstein was attacked on a beach in Two Rivers on July 29, 1985. She described her attacker to the police, and the description closely matched Steven. As a result, he was arrested and charged with the attack on Penny. Despite his claims of innocence, his appeals in 1987 and 1996 were denied by higher courts. Steven's case was later taken on by the Wisconsin Innocence Project in 2001. In 2002, DNA evidence was re-examined, and he was finally exonerated of the crimes, proving his innocence. Following his exoneration, he filed a civil lawsuit against Thomas Kokorek, the former sheriff, and Dennis Vogel, the former district attorney, seeking $36 million in damages for the wrongful conviction. However, Steven's freedom does not last long because his life is about to undergo a major change. When Teresa, a friend of Steven's, went missing, a search was conducted at a local salvage yard. This search was initiated based on information given by Bobby, Steven's nephew. Steven reported that Teresa came to his location to take photos and then left. However, evidence found at the scene contradicts Steven's testimony. These included bone fragments, a set of SUV car keys, blood in a vehicle, and a bullet from the garage with Teresa's DNA on it. As a result, Steven was jailed for Teresa's murder. During this time, he received a sum of $400,000 in a settlement in February 2006. The investigation also involved questioning Steven's 16-year-old nephew, Brendan Dassey. It is worth noting that Brendan was not accompanied by his parents or lawyer during the interrogation process. Initially, Brendan confessed to the crime, stating that he and Brendan had assaulted and killed Teresa before burning her body. However, Brendan later withdrew his statement, claiming that detectives had coerced him into making a false confession. In 2006, Brendan was charged as an accessory to the murder, a charge that stemmed from his initial statement. Despite the lack of physical evidence connecting him to the crime scene, but he faced the same charges as Steven. In 2007, Steven was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Later that year, Brendan was also found guilty of a life sentence with the possibility of parole in 2048. A conviction was made, but it was met with controversy. Many people, including Steven's family and his ex-fiancée Sandy Greenman, still firmly believe that Steven and Brendan are innocent. Steven's family continues to support him and hope that the real killer will be found. Sandy has been a vocal advocate for Steven. She described Steven as a model inmate and argues that people wrongly tarnish his reputation. Sandy spoke out in Brendan's defense, denying allegations that he had a history of violence. In contrast, some people firmly believe that Steven is guilty and should be in prison. One of these individuals is Jody Stokowski, another ex-fiancée of Steven's. Jody initially supported Steven's claim of innocence, but she later admitted that had made it up. In an interview, Jodi revealed that Stephen had threatened to harm her and her family. Therefore, she believes that he is capable of murder. Jodi said that Stephen wanted revenge on women, believing that he had been treated unfairly and that his life had been affected because of it. She strongly believes that Stephen is untrustworthy and described him as a monster. Stephen's defense team questioned the reliability of the blood evidence found in Teresa's car. They argued that the evidence may not have come from the crime scene, but from another source, taken from the vial containing Stephen's blood from a prior conviction. They claimed that the vial containing Stephen's blood had been tampered with and a hole could be seen in the cork. However, the prosecution countered this by conducting blood tests to check for preservatives that are often added to stored blood samples. Since no preservatives were detected, this could indicate that the blood was not old but newly drawn. Tive, which could suggest that the blood was fresh. Stephen's defense team disputed this finding, they calling in an expert witness, who claimed that the test results were unclear, and negative result could mean that there really is no preservative or that the testing technology is not advanced enough to detect preservatives. Both Stephen and Brendan have repeatedly appealed their convictions, but have been denied and they remain incarcerated. Brendan is currently be justified professors Laura Nyrider and Brendan Drizzen from Northwestern University. They have also faced many hurdles, but they remain committed to seeking justice for Brendan. In Stephen's case, the appointment of Kathleen Zellner, a renowned trial lawyer, has injected new hope. Kathleen has a track record of overturning 19 wrongful convictions and is known for her thorough analysis of cases and her ability to uncover missing evidence. She quickly got to work on Stephen's case, and she firmly believes in his innocence. Stephen's previous lawyers, Dean Strang and Jerry Buting, have stepped back from the case. In August 2016, Kathleen requested that new scientific tests be conducted on evidence from the case, and she was willing to cover the costs. Her goal was to prove that Stephen was framed for the crime. She focused on 3 burn pits found at the scene, which showed signs of human remains being burned. Notably, a human pelvic bone fragment was discovered, which had been mistakenly included with Teresa's remains. This discovery suggests that Teresa's remains may have been intentionally placed in Stephen's burn pit. Unfortunately, his defense was denied the chance to examine these bones because the prosecution failed to disclose them. Kathleen claimed that this was a Brady violation, meaning that crucial evidence that could have helped exonerate Stephen was not provided in time. Despite this setback, Kathleen continued to investigate the case from a new angle, which could lead to the identification of a new suspect. Kathleen decided to investigate the Bobby family's computer as an alternative to testing the bone fragments. The computer analysis revealed several disturbing findings, including violent and pornographic images of women being tortured and videos showing women as victims. These materials were accessed at times when Bobby was supposedly at home. Furthermore, Barbara Taddick, Bobby and Brendan's mother, her husband Scott, and Stephen's sister seemed to conceal evidence to avoid implicating Bobby. The forensic team successfully recovered 2,449 pages of data from the computer, including all of Bobby's searches, videos, and photos, and transferred it to a CD-ROM as evidence for the retrial. Bobby is the older brother of Brendan and the nephew of Stephen. During his uncle Stephen's trial, Bobby served as the prosecution's key eyewitness. According to Bobby, the last time he saw Teresa, she was heading towards Stephen's house. Later that afternoon, after returning from hunting, Bobby claimed that he was unable to find Teresa or her car. Brad Dassey, the half-brother of Bobby, has made several claims that have added. He believes Stephen is innocent. Additionally, Brad has stated that Barbara and Scott erased the computer's history, including all pornographic content. A key piece of evidence could potentially clear Stephen and Brendan's names, while further implicating Bobby. An eyewitness, Thomas Sawinski, has come forward claiming to have seen Bobby with an older man pushing Teresa's SUV back into the salvage yard. Thomas stated that he was driving to deliver newspapers when he saw the duo. As he passed them, Bobby attempted to stop him by stepping into the road. Thomas swerved to avoid Bobby and continued on his route. Thomas described Bobby as appearing unhappy to see him there. After learning about the SUV's discovery, Thomas contacted police to share what he had seen. However, the police rejected this, who told him they already knew who is the culprit. New testimony has cast doubt on the credibility of the prosecution's key witness, Bobby. Kathleen believes that if Thomas's claims are true, then Bobby's entire statement is false. She argued that the rejection of key evidence supporting Stephen's case deprived him of the opportunity to prove his innocence for years. The appeals court is considering the new evidence and make a decision in November 2022. Kathleen continues to represent those she believes have been wrongfully convicted. However, throughout the process, Brendan has maintained his innocence. The question remains as to whether Stephen is truly guilty. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of William Lewis Reese. William Lewis Reese was born in Oklahoma on July 1, 1959, the youngest of 13 children in his family. He grew up in Yukon and Anadarko. Due to his family's financial struggles, he had to drop out of school in the 9th grade to work as a farm laborer. He married Judy Flaming in 1979 after she became pregnant. After getting married, William joined the Oklahoma National Guard but eventually left. During this time, his marriage began to unravel, and Judy divorced him after just 1 year. However, William convinced Judy to remarry him, and they had another child together. Unfortunately, their marriage problems persisted, and heavy drinking led to physical abuse against Judy, ultimately causing their marriage to end again. Judy filed a complaint against her husband in 1982 after he physically abused her, claiming that he also threatened her life with a knife and a shotgun. As a result, Judy divorced him for the second time. William later remarried to another woman. However, this marriage was also short-lived, as his second wife divorced him just a few months later. And William's string of crimes resumed shortly after. In April 1986, William kidnapped a 19-year-old woman who was the daughter of a Texas sheriff's deputy. The woman's car broke down on her way to the gym. And William, who worked as a truck driver at that time, approached her and offered assistance by promising to take her to the nearest payphone in his truck. Once inside the vehicle, he restrained her and committed a sexual assault. He then drove her to a nearby motel where he reserved a room for the night. When Williams gave her permission to use the bathroom, she took advantage of the chance to break free and phone the police. He then was arrested, charged, and then released after posting bail. However, a month later, while still awaiting trial, he committed another sexual assault, resulting in a second arrest. Williams stood trial for both crimes, was found guilty, and received the 25 years prison sentence. However, upon reviewing his case, an appeals court found that there were procedural errors in the original trial. As a result, his sentence was significantly shortened and ultimately led to his parole in October 1996. William moved into his mother's home in Anadarko, Oklahoma, after serving 9.5 years. He regained his driver's license in early 1997 and then relocated to Houston, Texas. Shortly after, on May 16, 1997, he attempted to abduct and sexually assault Sandra Sapah, a 19-year-old. When Sandra stopped at a gas station in Webster, Texas, to use a payphone. After the call, she returned to her car and began driving, but soon had a flat tire, forcing her to stop again. As she stood there, unsure of what to do next, William stopped the car behind her and offered to help. Sandra accepted his offer and got into the truck. However, William's intentions were sinister, and he overpowered her, binding her wrists, then he continuing to drive on Interstate 45. Panicking, Sandra discovered that the door was unlocked. Despite being pregnant and fear for her life, Sandra made an attempt to escape by breaking free from the restraints and jumping out. Unfortunately, William caught hold of her and dragged her several miles along the pavement, causing severe injuries. Eventually, Sandra managed to break free and was taken to a nearby hospital. The police were notified, and she provided a description of her attacker. However, due to her traumatic state, she was unable to recall crucial details about the incident. To catch the predator, detectives needed more information. Months after the attack, they decided to use hypnosis on Sandra to see if she could remember anything else. Under hypnosis, Sandra recalled crucial details, including the license plate number of the truck that was involved in the crime. The detectives discovered a lead when they tracked down the owner of the vehicle with the matching license plate number. Which William? William was convicted of aggravated kidnapping and sentenced to 60 years in prison in 1998. While he was serving his sentence, detectives began to suspect that he might be linked to other crimes. Unraveling these secrets took years, leaving several families without answers. On a rainy April 3, 1997, 12-year-old Laura Smither asked her mother for permission to go jogging by herself at 9 a.m. Her mother agreed, not knowing that this ordinary decision would change her life forever. Laura Smither is the daughter of Bob and Gay Smither. She grew up in Friendswood, along with her younger brother. From an early age, Laura demonstrated a kind and gentle nature. She excelled academically and showed great talent in ballet. After being accepted into the prestigious Houston Ballet Academy, her goal of becoming a professional ballerina became a reality just days before this tragic incident. Laura's mother was surprised when she asked to go jogging that day, as she rarely ventured out alone. Homeschooled by her parents, Laura didn't even attend school. However, her desire to improve her dance skills had recently inspired her to take up cardio exercises, such as jogging. She had planned to go for a short run while making breakfast, and her mother agreed, she unaware of the danger lurking nearby. When Laura failed to return after a few hours, her parents began to worry. Normally, Laura was under close supervision and never went out alone for long. Her father, Bob Smither, searched the neighborhood but found no sign of her. He figured his daughter wouldn't be out for long, but she later didn't come back. Laura's parents reached out to relatives and friends to see if anyone had any information about her whereabouts, but no one had seen her. And they contacted the police to file a missing persons report. According to Bob, Laura went jogging this morning and it took longer than he expected. As police began their investigation, locals joined Laura's family to assist in the search. With photos of Laura in hand, her family and neighbors went door to door, asking if anyone had any information. The next morning, the police resumed their search, on foot combing through the nearby woods and helicopters scouring the area from above. Despite the initial lack of leads, the community's determination never wavered. Hundreds of volunteers joined the cause, and the eventually swelling to 6,000 volunteers for a week. Meanwhile, law enforcement agencies worked diligently to locate Laura. The National Coast Guard and the FBI also joined forces with the local police department to aid in the extensive search operation. Initial theories suggested that Laura may have become lost in the woods, but after that, the investigation went in one direction, now focus on the possibility of criminal behavior. On Sunday, April 20, 1997, a gathering at Friendswood High School was taking place to discuss the next steps in finding Laura. During this meeting, the police chief's expression became anxious after receiving the phone call, leaving those present there wondering what made him react like that. That evening at 10 p.m., Laura's parents received devastating news. A man walking his dog near a retention pond in Pasadena, about 12 miles from where Laura went missing, stumbled upon a badly decomposing body of a young girl. The girl was wearing only a pair of socks and was found in a muddy area. The police immediately suspected that the body was Laura's, and this was later confirmed through an autopsy. Everyone was devastated by the sudden and tragic loss of Laura. In addition to their grief, fear gripped the neighborhood, with many worried that a predator was on the loose and could target another child. To address these concerns and prevent further harm, the police opened an investigation, but initially they had no information about the perpetrator. To gather more information, the police started interviewing sex offenders in the area. They began to focus on William Reese, a 38-year-old equipment operator, was working at Windsor Estate in Friendswood at the time. On the day of Laura's disappearance, William left the workplace around the time she went missing and returned 30 minutes later, it raising suspicions about his activities during that short period. Police conducted an in-depth investigation but were unable to find any evidence shows that William is involved in this crime. As a result, the case went unsolved for years, leaving many questions unanswered. 19 years later, another mysterious disappearance happened to Kelly Cox, 20 years old. Kelly, a criminology student at the University of North Texas, in Denton on July 15, 1997, she and her classmates took a field trip to a local prison in Denton for a criminology class. She left her car in the parking lot across from the police station and had hidden a spare key in a magnetic box underneath her car. She then locked her belongings, including her cell phone, inside the car as instructed by her professor. After completing the jail tour at noon, Kelly rushed to her car to go to the university to take a test. However, when she tried to use the spare key to open her car door, it did not work, despite she checking it the night before. Since Kelly's phone was locked in her car, so she went to a nearby gas station and used a payphone to call her boyfriend, Lawrence Harris III, for help. She then purchased a drink inside the gas station. But from that point on, Kelly was never seen alive again. After about 45 minutes, Lawrence arrived at the meeting place, but when he got there, her car was still in the parking lot, yet Kelly herself was nowhere to be found. Neither the key box nor the key were present at the scene. He spent some time searching for Kelly, and when he couldn't find her, he decided to call her mother to see if she had returned home safely. However, Kelly's mother informed him that she hadn't arrived. Despite the initial suspicion surrounding Kelly's disappearance, but her family chose to wait a little longer to see if she would come back. It wasn't until 5:30 p.m. that same day when Kelly failed to pick up her 19-month-old daughter, Alexis, from her babysitter, that her family became certain that something was amiss. Kelly's family knew that she was a responsible mother, and it was entirely out of character for her to neglect her daughter like that. When Kelly was reported missing, the police immediately started searching for her. In keeping with standard procedure in missing persons cases, the police started by scrutinizing people close to Kelly. Initially, they focused on Kelly's boyfriend Lawrence, but after he passed 4 polygraph tests, he was cleared as a suspect. The case made progress when information led them to another potential suspect, William Reese, who had been under investigation in the Laura Smithers case. William, a sex offender, was considered a top suspect in Kelly's disappearance because a gas station receipt placed him in the Denton area on the same day Kelly vanished, even though he didn't live there at the time. The police searched his car for Kelly's fingerprints but did not find any. Without any leads, witnesses, or surveillance footage, the case stalled and went unsolved for many years. Kelly's disappearance was extremely difficult for her mother and stepfather, who had to raise Alexis on their own. As the years went by, Kelly never returned, but her daughter followed in her mother's footsteps, attending the same university. Alexis held on to the hope that her mother would come back one day. Kelly's family never lost hope of her return, continued to share her story, and kept her picture visible. Unfortunately, their wish never came true, and Kelly never made it back home. On the morning of August 17, 1997, Jessica Kane, a 17-year-old high school student, failed to return home after attending a theater party the night before. Jessica was born on August 28, 1979. She is known for her vibrant personality, creativity, and passion for sports. While studying at O'Connell High School in Galveston, Texas, she did well academically and served as captain of the school's coaching team. After focusing on her drama career and participating in numerous plays, Jessica attended a musical review in Dickinson on August 16, 1997. Following the event, she joined her friends at a cast party at Bennigan's on Bay Avenue Boulevard. However, Jessica did not return home that night, worrying her mother, who woke her father and called her. They reached out to several friends who had attended the party with Jessica, and all of them reported that she had left around 1:30 a.m. Jessica's parents immediately sensed that something was wrong and began searching for her. Upon investigating, Jessica's father found her vehicle parked near the Lamarck exit, close to the freeway, with her valuables still intact. He later quickly reported his to the police. As police began their investigation, hundreds of volunteers joined in the search for Jessica. During this challenging time, Jessica's parents met Bob and Gay Smither, a couple who had also lost their daughter, Laura Smither. Jessica's family and the Smithers family are going through their own grief. The Smithers family has tried to support Jessica's parents in their search for her. Despite the best efforts of police and volunteers, no sign of Jessica has been found. As a result, police are beginning to consider foul play and believe the chances of Jessica being found alive are extremely low. The case eventually went cold, but Jessica's family never gave up searching for their daughter. In a separate incident, on July 26, 1997, 19-year-old Tiffany Johnson's car was found abandoned at a car wash in Bethany, Oklahoma. But she disappeared without a trace. Tiffany was born on April 6, 1978, to Michael and Kathy Dober. She was the youngest daughter, extremely close to her family, especially her mother. Tiffany was a lively and optimistic young woman who grew up in a small town, with a passion for plants and gardening that she inherited from her grandfather. After graduating from high school in 1996, she married Ryan Johnson in 1997 and moved to Bethany, Oklahoma, where she took on 2 jobs to save money for college. Her dream was to attend Oklahoma State University to pursue a degree in botany. But unfortunately, that goal was never realized. On July 26, 1997, Tiffany finished her part-time shift at a restaurant around 2 p.m. She later headed home to get ready for a night out with her husband, Ryan, to celebrate their 3-month anniversary. Tiffany was supposed to meet Ryan at 11 p.m., but before that, she stopped at the Sunshine Car Wash to wash her white neon Dodge. Tragically, she was never seen again. When Ryan went looking for her that night, he couldn't find her at home and found no signs of her whereabouts. A police officer from the Bethany Police Department discovered Tiffany's abandoned white Dodge Neon at a car wash around midnight. The car's key was still in the ignition, and the door was open. The officer found Tiffany's purse inside the vehicle and a phone number for her mother, Kathy, in the glove box. However, when contacted, Kathy had no information about her daughter's whereabouts. The investigators then reached out to Tiffany's husband, Ryan, who also claimed to be unaware of his wife's location. This raised concerns, and it became apparent that something was amiss. The next day, July 27, 1997, near I-40 and Gregory Road, searchers found the body of a young Caucasian woman. When the police arrived at the scene, they suspected the body might be Tiffany's. The suspicion was confirmed when her husband Ryan identified the body from the pictures. Tiffany's body was found with only a swimsuit on, as all other clothing had been removed. The autopsy results revealed that Tiffany was sexually assaulted and strangled to death, although the exact time of her death could not be confirmed. Authorities collected unknown DNA from her body as evidence. With no leads on a suspect, investigators initially focused on Ryan, Tiffany's husband. However, they soon discovered that Tiffany was last seen at the car wash at 6 p.m., and Ryan had a solid alibi, having been at work from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. A new lead emerged when the car wash owner contacted investigators, reporting that he saw a customer on the same day Tiffany disappeared. The customer was a man named William Reese, who had been featured in a news report a few months earlier for his involvement in an abduction in Texas. What's more noteworthy is that William has a personal relationship with Tiffany. His mother was good friends with Tiffany's mother, although he himself had never met Tiffany. After her death, he even called Tiffany's mother to offer his condolences. Despite this new information, police were still unable to gather enough evidence to prove William's involvement in Tiffany's murder, and the case remained unsolved for a long time. In 2015, thanks to advancements in DNA technology, investigators found new evidence in the Tiffany case. A DNA swab taken during Tiffany's autopsy in 1997 was sent to the lab for testing. The results matched a DNA profile in the Cody's database, which implicated William in Tiffany's murder. He was subsequently charged in Oklahoma City with the 1997 kidnapping and murder of Tiffany. Just as his trial was about to begin, William unexpectedly started confessing to other crimes in an attempt to reach a deal with the prosecution. Despite having eluded police for 19 years, he ultimately revealed the truth, having a history of aggravated kidnapping and other crimes. When shown photos of Laura Smither, Jessica, and Kelly Cox, he immediately accepted responsibility for their murders and disappearances, although denying any sexual motive behind his actions. William was questioned about his victims in Oklahoma. He agreed to cooperate with authorities by showing them the burial sites of two victims, Jessica and Kelly, on one condition: he would not face the death penalty. In April 2016, investigators followed him to a location in a Houston pasture where human remains were discovered. After several days of excavation, the Harris County Medical Examiner's Office confirmed that the remains belonged to Jessica. The search continued in Brazoria County, where another set of human remains was found. Dental records confirmed that these remains belonged to Kelly Cox. The trial for the murder of another victim, Tiffany, began in May 2021. William was found guilty by a jury on May 28, 2021, and received a death sentence on August 19, 2021, for her abduction and murder. After his murder conviction in Oklahoma, he was sent to Texas in March 2022 to face trial for the murders of Laura Smither, Kelly Cox, and Jessica. He pleaded guilty to all three charges and received a life imprisonment sentence in June 2022. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Buchanan family. Molly first met Adam Buchanan when she applied for a job as an office manager at his company. At the time, Adam was divorced and raising his son, Nolan, from a previous marriage on his own. The cheerful and outgoing Molly quickly caught Adam's attention. Their mutual interests led to a romance that blossomed into a serious relationship, and eventually, Molly moved in with Adam. Molly became pregnant and their baby was named Gavin. Those who knew the Buchanans described them as a loving family of four. The patriarch of the family owned a construction company, and they purchased a vacation property in El Dorado County, California, a small cabin on 19 acres in Greenwood. The rustic cabin had no electricity, water, sewer, or gas. Adam, who worked in construction, became actively involved in renovating it, and the family began visiting regularly. On September 13, 2015, at 10 a.m., members of the Garden Valley Fire Department were called to a wildfire in Greenwood Township, located on Highway 193 between Cool and Georgetown. When they arrived, they found that the fire had burned 10 acres of land, and while the cabin was still smoldering, it was completely destroyed. Fire department personnel found charred remains in the ashes. The fire scene was still intact, and at 11 a.m., firefighters contacted the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office. At the time, no one understood the severity of the situation. Firefighters suspected that the victim of the wildfire was a pet trapped inside the house. When they arrived, the rest of the house was still smoldering, making it impossible to check inside. They had to wait for the fire to go out and the temperature to drop. While investigating the house, police officers detected an odor similar to that of burning flesh. Police later found a human skull and a charred torso, indicating that a tragedy had occurred. Police called for backup. Officers from the sheriff's office arrived to thoroughly investigate the scene. It became clear that the small, isolated cabin was not the owner's primary residence, but rather a vacation home. A Dodge pickup truck and trailer were discovered on a plot of land near the cabin. Police obtained the license plate number to identify the owner, who may have been affected by the wildfire. It was quickly determined that the truck and trailer belonged to Buchanan Construction, owned by Adam Buchanan. He lived approximately 160 miles away, in Bonita, California. Police were unsure whether the person inside was Adam Buchanan or someone else. The name of the company owner provided police with their first lead into the investigation. The Bonita police were tasked with checking on the welfare of all members of the Buchanan family. They arrived at the address and parked in the Buchanan driveway, where they saw a white Ford pickup truck. When the officers knocked on the door, Nolan, Adam's 16-year-old son from his first marriage, answered. He was surprised to see the officers in uniform and asked why they were there. In order to avoid alarming anyone in the house, the officers decided to first determine who was inside. Nolan explained that his father, Adam, had gone away for the weekend to their estate, 160 miles away, with Molly and their 8-year-old son, Gavin, and they were expected back that evening. According to Nolan, his father had left him in charge of the house. Police did not yet have enough evidence to confirm that the remains found in the cabin were those of the Buchanans, but the information they gathered, along with the discovery of what they believed to be 2 human remains on the evening of September 13th, was enough to report the family missing from the El Dorado County fire. The following day, September 14th, El Dorado County Police went to the Nolan home to conduct more in-depth interviews and identify the victims of the fire. At the home, officers spoke with Adam's parents, Howard and Susan Buchanan. They mentioned that their son, the owner of the burned-out cabin, had been coming to the cabin to do repairs himself. The parents were very concerned because they had not been able to contact their son or daughter-in-law until that time. From their statements, officers learned that the home was equipped with a generator, but that there was no electricity at the time of the incident. There were also gas tanks inside. This led to 2 possible explanations: the fire could have been accidental or intentional. By September 15th, the fire had cooled, allowing police to collect evidence, including debris from a nearby fire pit. Detective James Peterson of the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office reported finding new remains, which changed the direction of the investigation. Police discovered a skull fragment with a bullet hole. At that point, it was clear that a homicide had occurred, and according to the sheriff, it could no longer be considered an accidental fire. The remains were collected and sent for DNA testing. In the first set of remains, a bullet was found lodged in the victim's thigh. The bullet-riddled skull was identified as that of a child. There was now no doubt that the fire had been used to cover up the crime. Police initially focused on whether anyone in his profession might have had a grudge against him. They also looked into Molly's life to see if she had any enemies who might have committed the crime. When those leads proved fruitless, police began looking into Molly and Adam's marital problems, which uncovered more problems. Police discovered that Molly and Adam's relationship had deteriorated significantly over time and that at the time of the murders, they had been sleeping in separate rooms for some time. A diary belonging to Molly detailed instances of abuse by Adam. Witnesses reported that Adam had not only abused Molly, but also abused children. Molly's mother, Susie Slanker, expressed to police that she feared that the couple might seriously harm each other during their arguments. Although Molly did not end her relationship with Adam, she would occasionally leave with her son to stay at her parents' house, returning after a few days until the next argument. It was also revealed that the couple enjoyed hunting in the area near their vacation home. Since both were armed, the police hypothesized that during an argument, one of them picked up a gun and shot the other, then, realizing the seriousness of the situation, committed suicide. There was a notable contradiction. If the tragedy had been caused by a conflict between husband and wife, there should have been a weapon found near one of them. However, no weapon was found. The police thought that the weapon might have been destroyed in the fire, making identification more difficult. For 5 days, members of the forensic team meticulously sifted through the ashes of the house. Despite a thorough search, they did not find any weapons. At this point, the medical examiner confirmed that the DNA found on the bodies belonged to Adam Buchanan, Molly McAfee, and their 8-year-old son Gavin. All 3 victims had suffered gunshot wounds prior to the fire, and the angle of the shot made it unlikely that they had committed suicide. The absence of a gun suggested that a 4th person had been present in the home who had shot the Buchanans, prompting a complete reopening of the investigation. Police turned to the victim's 16-year-old son, Nolan. He told police that the family had driven away in an old Dodge truck. Nolan explained that his father had chosen to use the company truck instead of their personal Ford, which was parked in the driveway, because he had loaded it with rocks for landscaping near their country cabin. The truck was later found near the burned-out cabin. When asked why Nolan did not go on vacation with his relatives, he explained, as he had in his first interview, that he needed to take care of the house and garden while his father and stepmother were away. Nolan also mentioned that a neighbor was illegally planting trees on the edge of the Buchanan property, which led to frequent arguments between his father and the neighbor. His father would often demand that the neighbor stop planting trees and threaten to call the police. Nolan spoke about the difficulties of the family business, revealing that the company was facing serious financial problems. The company was downsizing, with only 5 employees remaining. According to his father, debts were mounting rapidly. The investigation identified a suspect, a neighbor. The main problem was that no one could identify which neighbors were involved. The police went door to door, interviewing homeowners in the area. This approach paid off when they found a man who confirmed that he had argued with Adam about growing an illegal crop. However, he claimed that the disagreement ended after a tense conversation and that he had an alibi. After confirming the neighbor's alibi, the police investigated the family's financial situation, as their business was struggling. On September 18th, police went to Adam's company to talk to the employees. Nolan's words were correct. The company was in dire straits, facing bankruptcy with debts exceeding $30,000. As a result, several employees were fired. Several of these former employees were very unhappy about being fired, making them potential suspects in the case. This aspect provided an important lead for the police. Over the weekend, the local high school held a community cleanup day. Students worked to clear debris from a park located about a mile from Adams' construction company. During the cleanup on September 19th, they discovered a small wallet containing Molly McAfee and Adam Buchanan's wallets and identification cards hidden under one of the bushes. There was also a .22 caliber rifle nearby. Police were dispatched to the scene immediately. The county sheriff's office has since developed a new theory. The suspect may have used the rifle to kill the Buchanans and, to conceal the crime, remove their identification from the scene. This finding is significant because it suggests that someone traveled from Bonita to Greenwood to kill the family and then returned to Bonita to dispose of the evidence and the weapon. This suspect is likely a Bonita resident. The location of the evidence near Buchanan Construction supports the idea that the boss was killed by a disgruntled employee. Police have sent the gun and bag of documents for analysis and are seeking a search warrant for the company's records and premises. During their search, police accessed a video surveillance camera located on the company's premises. Fortunately, the camera focused on the parking lot, not the company's premises. Surveillance footage showed the family had left town on Friday, so police reviewed footage from that day. They were surprised to see that Adam had hooked up a trailer full of rocks to a Ford F-150, not a Dodge truck as Nolan had claimed. Police discovered that Nolan had deliberately interfered with the investigation. If the white Ford had pulled the rock trailer to the cabin, then someone must have driven it back and parked it in the Buchanan family's driveway. Police decided to interview Nolan again. Nolan repeated his account of the weekend, where he had been, and who he had met, but this time they also asked him about the movie he had seen at the theater and how he had paid for his shopping at the mall. When asked how he paid for dessert on their date, Nolan said he used his father's credit card. Police then obtained a search warrant for Buchanan's Bonita home, inspected his vehicles and reviewed his financial records. They found a Ford parked in the driveway, which they carefully inspected. They noticed red dirt on the tires, which matched the dirt found in Greenwood. If the Ford had made the trip the previous weekend or earlier, some dirt might have remained. Unfortunately, the fire destroyed the tire tracks near the cabin, but the accumulation of dirt suggested the car may have been in Greenwood recently. Officers tracked the bank card transactions and discovered that Adam Buchanan used his credit card at Taco Bell on Friday, September 11th, while traveling to Greenwood. Nolan, on the other hand, claimed he was home, not with his parents, and had a credit card with him. Police went to the diner and reviewed security footage, confirming their suspicions. A white Ford was seen instead of a truck. When they searched the Ford, they found a Taco Bell receipt from September 11th showing 4 drinks purchased, not 3. Additionally, evidence at the scene of the fire showed the presence of 4 drink cups, confirming that Nolan had been in the car. The next credit card transaction occurred on Saturday, September 12th, at the Valencia Club Bar in Pennon, about 30 minutes from the cabin. Adam's parents had alerted detectives to the bar, saying their son and daughter-in-law often went there after working on renovating the cabin. Security cameras recorded the moment the couple left the bar, and highway traffic cameras tracked their route. A Ford F-150 was seen heading toward the Buchanan cabin at 2:30 a.m. on the day of the fire, and then driving in the opposite direction at 3:30 a.m. In the first instance, cameras captured Adam and Molly in the car. In the second, only Nolan was recorded. Hours later, on the morning of Sunday, September 13th, Adam's credit card was used at 3 locations owned by Bonita, Starbucks, McDonald's, and a gas station. The bank confirmed to police that Buchanan had only 1 bank card. This information contradicted Nolan's accounts. At this time, forensic results showed that Nolan's fingerprints were found on the gun. He was arrested in the classroom. Nolan Buchanan pleaded not guilty to the charges against him and attempted to twist the story by claiming that his father had shot his family. He said his father had pointed a gun at him, and in self-defense he took the weapon away, accidentally shooting his father. Nolan maintained that it was self-defense, claiming that the fire and his subsequent lies were due to his panic and extreme fear. He explained that he had doused the house with gasoline and set it on fire to cover it up. The defense repeatedly pointed to Adam's abusive behavior toward his son and other family members to the jury. The medical examiner raised doubts about the verdict, noting that the gunshot wound to Gavin's skull indicated it was fired at a nearly 90 degrees angle. Nolan, meanwhile, claimed that he and his brother's beds were next to each other and that they were both awakened by noises and screams. At that point, Nolan allegedly saw someone enter the bedroom and shoot Gavin. The shooter then pointed the rifle at Nolan, who was able to push the attacker away. According to this account, the shot would have come from about a 45 degrees angle, which is inconsistent with forensic evidence. The prosecution believes Nolan shot his younger brother Gavin while they were home alone, as their parents were at a bar. After waiting for their father and stepmother to return, Nolan shot them as well. The position of the bodies suggested that Adam was killed first, followed by Molly. Nolan then took his rifle, his parents' papers, poured gasoline over the bodies, and set the house on fire. He then went home, met his girlfriend, and spent the day with her to establish his alibi. On July 13, 2018, a jury convicted Nolan Buchanan of 3 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 150 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years.